Chapter 1241. Sui returned to Signs after 6 years. His every move was watched by countless people. People believed that he didn't come back to Signs just to see Heinz for the last time. There must be other things he wanted to do. The truth was just as people expected. After attending Heinz's funeral, Sui appeared in the two empires, the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Mana Magic Kingdom, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, and a series of other important Signs countries. He met with the leaders of these countries. No one knew what the meeting was about, but after that, these countries announced to the public that they were going to cooperate with New Flyer. However, they didn't announce the details of the cooperation. In front of everyone's doubts, Sui went around the Signs continent like this before disappearing in front of everyone again. People were very confused about this. Why did Sui come back this time? Dad, is this enough? Freya looked at Sui in confusion. We only need to give them some technical information. Can they grasp it? It's enough. Sui nodded. Right now, the major countries in Signs already have a complete magic industry system and technology accumulation. The so-called space program sounds very difficult, but as long as there is a foundation and someone provides the direction and starting research information, that won't be difficult to research it. But if we let them research it themselves, won't the progress be very slow? Freya raised her eyebrows. Dad, don't you want these countries to be able to enter space as soon as possible? No. In terms of entering space, we can actually do it right now. The reason why we let the countries and Signs participate is because we want them to set their sights a bit higher and not be limited to the small Signs in this planet. Freya shrugged. They might not understand your thoughts. Sui laughed. It's not up to them not to understand. After knowing the benefits of the space program, or the threat, no matter how unwilling they are, they have to invest in it. Freya giggled and pursed her lips. Daddy, sometimes I feel that you're really bad. These countries on the continent are always led by the nose by you. Even if they want to do something, they always have to consider your opinion. Do you know? In the past few years, no matter which country I went to, they all looked at me cautiously, as if they were afraid of offending me. I don't think they're afraid of me, but of you. Sui immediately smiled. That's not necessarily true. Maybe he's just afraid of you? I've heard a lot of people say in private that Sui's daughter is even more ruthless than her father. You must not offend her. Freya pretended to be angry. Who said that? I'm not that ruthless. On the other hand, these guys are bullying me because I'm the new guild leader. They think that I'm young and don't know anything, so they often set traps for me. If it weren't for the fact that you always said that you wanted everyone to develop together, I would have dealt with them a long time ago. Sui looked at Freya's angry face, smiled, and asked softly, Freya, it must be hard being the guild leader these past few years, right? Freya was silent for a moment. She first nodded, then shook her head, and smiled. At first, it was hard, but after getting used to it, it's nothing. Then do you regret your decision now? If you don't want to and want to step down as the guild leader, I'll support you. Your mother often told me that she hopes that you and Suzhua can go to the island, live together as a family, and live a happy life. Suzhua was Sui and Steel's second child. He was different from Freya. After he was born, Sui used the tradition of Earth to give him a Chinese name. Just like Sui, he was a little different. Suzhua's personality was very different from Freya's since he was young. He was very calm when he was young, unlike Freya, who was lively and active. He was also very interested in studying magic since he was young. With the excellent genes passed down from his parents and the excellent magic teaching environment at home, Suzhua showed great talent in magic since he was young. He entered the New Flight College at a very young age and directly entered the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce after graduation. He was 28 years old this year and was now one of the project leaders of the New Flyer Magic Research Institute. His current research topic was related to magic power consumption. No, I don't regret it. Freya only showed such a bright and innocent smile in front of Sui. For the first 2 years, I was working hard because of the decision I made. But after I got used to this position, I feel that being the president is very good. After a pause, Freya said to Sui very straightforwardly, Dad, I like the feeling of being able to make a lot of important decisions. It makes me feel that my life is completely under my control. It makes me feel free. Being in a position with such great responsibility makes you feel free. He looked at Freya with a little surprise. He thought that his eldest daughter might be born to be in a position of power, which was very different from him. Yes, Freya nodded hard. I like this feeling now, so you don't have to worry about me quitting this job. He couldn't help but laugh. It's better if you want to continue. I've said it before, you should try to be the master of your life. As your father, I can only pave the way for you. It's up to you how you walk in the end. Now that you think it's good, then keep doing it. But you have to know that the president of New Flyer has a lot of power and responsibility, so you can't just do what you want. I know. Freya hugged Su Yi's arm with a smile. Dad, now that you have the Demon Cloud continent in your hands, have you thought about building a country and being the king, ruling the entire Demon Cloud continent? I think that would be very cool. Cool your head. Suitme knocked Freya's head without any hesitation before taking a deep look at her. I'm not interested. If you're interested, you could be the queen yourself. I won't stop you. Freya rubbed her head and giggled. I'm also not interested. Although I like the feeling of being in control as the president, I still feel that it's very troublesome. If I had to be the queen like Ani 70, I would definitely be annoyed to death. It's good that you understand. Hearing that Freya's words came from her heart, Su let out a sigh of relief. You're Ani 70. Actually, when I first met her, she was a pure and caring little girl, but she was very different from now. Freya secretly looked at the complicated expression on Su Yi's face. After thinking about it, she carefully asked, Dad, are you and Ani 70 having a conflict? No, there's no conflict between us. This is a problem of the Lampari Kingdom. We're all clear on this, but we can't avoid it. This is something that can't be helped, but no one can complain about it. Then you went to the two empires, the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Nozdurma Business Union Kingdom, but you left after attending Uncle Heinz's funeral in the Lampari Kingdom. You didn't see Ani 70 after coming back, right? Raymond asked me about it yesterday. Oh, Raymond asked you? Su asked in a surprised voice. What did he say? Raymond just casually said a few words, saying that he wanted to greet you, but he didn't mention Ani 70. He did mention that you went to Banta City and attended Uncle Heinz's funeral, but you didn't take a trip to Anvilmar City. Freya paused before continuing. Raymond seemed a bit dissatisfied about this. Dissatisfied? Su revealed a faint smile. I stayed in Banda City for 5 days and didn't 70 also not attend Heinz's funeral? Freya blinked and couldn't help but chuckle. Dad, why do I feel that you and Ani 70 are like a couple that is having a fight? Don't speak nonsense. Su reprimanded. 70 is the queen of the Lampari Kingdom. You have to give her enough respect no matter what. Moreover, your mom heard it. Mom wouldn't say anything even if she heard it. Freya said with a giggle. Mom said to me before that if you were willing, perhaps you would be the Lampari Kingdom's king right now. Su helplessly shook his head and said with a sigh, It's all in the past. Let's not mention it. In short, because of our positions, 70 and I are indeed a bit unharmonious. But she's an old friend that I've known for 30 years, and the Lampari Kingdom is our New Flyer's most important partner and ally. So personal conflicts don't mean anything, so you don't need to worry about this. Raymond and I have never worried about this problem. We've always had a happy cooperation. But this space project was proposed by you, and you're deliberately excluding the Lampari Kingdom. So I want to understand your true attitude. My attitude isn't important. He shook his head. The Lampari Kingdom has the most complete magic machine industry in the signs and has the deepest accumulation of technology. So of course they won't miss out on the space project. Is that so? Freya revealed a sweet smile. Then I understand. Seeing Freya agree so quickly, Su suddenly thought of a question and asked with knit brows, Freya, are you close to Raymond? Yes, we often talk in private, so our relationship is indeed good. What is it? You wouldn't have any feelings for him, right? Su asked in a hesitant voice. Feelings? Freya looked at Su in surprise. After thinking for a bit, she suddenly understood and broke out in laughter. Dad, you must have misunderstood. misunderstood something. Ha ha, 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 I'm dying of laughter. I know, you don't need to worry. How could I like Raymond? I already knew that Raymond. Freya couldn't stand up from laughing, so she could only look up at Sue-E with a teasing smile. Isn't he my little brother? Sue-E was instantly embarrassed. Chapter 1242. He stayed in the New Flight Commerce main base to discuss some ideas on promoting the space program with Freya and met up with some old friends before Sue-E left Signs again. Counting it, from the time he came back to Signs, seeing the dying Hines, and leaving, it had only been half a month. It could be said that he had come and gone in a rush. After receiving the news that Sue-E had boarded the magic airship and left Signs, countless people in Signs let out a sigh of relief. People thought that Sue-Yi's return would bring a large change to Signs, but they never thought that Sue-Yi would just secretly promote the space program to some countries and not do anything else. Many people discussed this in private, and they couldn't help guessing. Could it be that what Sue-Yi said before was true? He had really given the new flyer to Freya and didn't care about anything in Signs? No one could read Sue-Yi's mind, so no one could be certain of Sue-Yi's true thoughts. But no matter what, Sue-Yi had left Signs again. Last time he left, he came back after 6 years, and he had only been back for half a month. Then this time, would he be gone for a longer period of time? Not everyone was this optimistic. There were several newspapers that analyzed the meaning of Sue-Yi's rush this time, and they directly pointed out that with the large improvement in transportation, even if Signs was over 10,000 kilometers away from the Demon Cloud continent, it was no longer like two different worlds that couldn't be connected. As long as Sue-Yi was willing, he could even come back in a day or two. There were large amounts of fleets that didn't belong to the new flyer between the Demon Cloud continent and Signs, closely connecting the two continents. In conclusion, the world that people explored now was countless times larger than before, but in terms of the senses, the world had actually become much smaller. Look, people didn't even need to go out, and they could know what was happening thousands of kilometers away. They could see the images with their own eyes, while also being able to communicate with people thousands of kilometers away. If they couldn't, they could take the most advanced magic airship and arrive at the scene of the incident in a short period of time. Like this, what was the difference between being right in front of you and being thousands of kilometers or even tens of thousands of kilometers away? So although Sue-Yi had left Signs, as long as he was willing, he would still have a large influence on Signs. In the end, the new flyer was still the strongest magic machine company in Signs and had a large role in all the countries on the continent. So who would dare ignore it? It had to be said, the analysis of these newspapers was very reasonable. But for those people who let out a sigh of relief after knowing that Sue-Yi had left, Sue-Yi staying in Signs was more of a psychological pressure on them. Now that he had left, it was to show everyone his attitude, so naturally these people felt much more relaxed. So with Sue-Yi's departure, the hearts of the people in Signs began to waver again. August 1824, 3 months after Sue-Yi left Signs again, the Malar Empire suddenly sent troops to attack the Nomi Duchy to the southeast. In just a week, the small Nomi Duchy was completely invaded by the Malar Empire's army and was declared extinct. Duke Nomi received this news ahead of time and chose to escape. Due to his slight bloodline relationship with the Kamla Empire's royal family, Duke Nomi Duchy fled to Wimbledon City and sought the protection of the Kamla Empire. The Kamla Empire immediately issued a serious warning to the Malar Empire, warning the Malar Empire to immediately withdraw their troops and return the Nomi Duchy to Duke Nomi Duchy. However, the Malar Empire sternly refused. At the end of August, the Kamla Empire chose to send troops, but they did not directly attack the Malar Empire. Instead, they attacked a small duchy sandwiched between the two empires. Before the Malar Empire could react, they took over this small duchy in just 5 days. This small duchy called Logenstein was inextricably linked to the Malar Empire. Because it was sandwiched between the two empires, it was in a very sensitive geographical position and had always been protected by the Malar Empire. Now that the Kamla Empire suddenly sent troops to attack Logenstein, it was undoubtedly revenge for the Malar Empire's occupation of the Nomi Duchy. Just as the two empires were still denouncing each other through official and unofficial channels, the southeast of the continent was also in turmoil. The Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom's first and second fleets moved out at the same time and consecutively contributed more than 10 islands to the east of Signs. Then, they quickly built fortifications on these islands and completely sealed off the coastline of the southeast corner of the continent, controlling it in their own hands. The coastal countries of the southeast corner of the continent naturally protested against this, but the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom didn't care about this at all. Later on, in the middle of September, they officially declared war on the Chino Kingdom to the north. The Chino Kingdom could be considered one of the countries that developed the magic machine industry earlier in the southeast corner of the continent, but because they didn't invest enough in military magic machines and didn't cooperate with the Frestec Chamber of Commerce like the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, their military power was far weaker. When the two countries fought, the Chino Kingdom kept retreating, and the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom easily took over a small part of the Chino Kingdom's southern territory. The turmoil in the southeast corner of the continent seemed to affect the situation in the other parts of Signs. At the end of September, the Lampari Kingdom's northern army used the excuse of a missing soldier to send troops into the Antilla Kingdom to the north of the Sac Kingdom, engaging in a fierce exchange of fire with the Antilla Kingdom's army. The Antilla Kingdom's army was defeated, and the Lampari Kingdom's northern army took this chance to invade the Antilla Kingdom. At the same time, the Malar Empire and the Kamla Empire that had already gathered their armies on the border finally ended their month of verbal abuse. On the morning of the 29th of September, the Kamla Empire sent out a large group of scouts that were ambushed by the Malar Empire and were completely wiped out. The Kamla Empire immediately expressed their indignation and officially declared war on the Malar Empire. On the 2nd of October, the armies of the two sides began fighting on the border of the two countries. With the first explosion of the magic cannons in this battle, it meant that the Signs that had been peaceful for over 20 years was once again in turmoil. Hashtag. It was different from the Signs continent that was filled with war and unrest. The Demon Cloud continent was very calm right now. After the royal city of the goblins was captured, the Goblin King fell into the control of New Flyer. With the cooperation of the Goblin King, New Flyer worked with the other races to control all the goblins on the Demon Cloud continent without much effort. Although they killed countless goblins in the battle, there were just too many goblins. In the end, there were still a shocking number of captives, with a rough count being over 3 million. According to the plan that Su, E, and the other races had already made, these goblins were scattered and then divided between New Flyer and the other races, taking them all back to be laborers. New Flyer had received close to 1.5 million from this. This terrifying number with the manpower that New Flyer had, many people were worried that they wouldn't be able to control it. But because the Gnome King controlled them, and adding in the fact that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had captured the gnomes and given them enough food, guaranteeing their basic necessities, these gnomes were very willing to accept the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's orders. After all, before this, the goblins' productivity was very low, so there were very few goblins that could eat their fill. They faced threats from other races every day, even threats from their own race. Now that they were under New Flyer, being able to keep their lives and fill their stomachs was a great gift to these goblins. As for resisting, what a joke. New Flyer had all those terrifying things. How could they resist? So after the initial chaos, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce easily took in the 1.5 million gnomes. Actually, adding in the people that came to the Demon Cloud continent with Su, E, the New Flyer guards that New Flyer sent to the Demon Cloud continent only added up to around 14,000. If so many goblins resisted together, even if they weren't afraid, it would be quite troublesome. But these goblins were very obedient. Often, only a small team of 10 guards was needed to keep an eye on tens of thousands of goblins so that they didn't dare to make any movements. Moreover, Su E also implemented a subcontracting system among the goblins. He picked out the smarter goblins and gave them slightly higher status and treatment. He put them in charge of managing a portion of the goblins and directly reported to New Flyer. If there was a problem with the goblins under his management, he would directly look for them to take responsibility. Moreover, these goblins as managers could also supervise each other. If they reported abnormalities in the goblins of another team, and it was verified, they could even give extra rewards. Under this method, the simple-minded goblins couldn't play any tricks even if they wanted to. So New Flyer suddenly obtained a huge manpower of 1.5 million. Although not all of these people were useful, and their individual abilities were far inferior to humans and other races, they were still capable of completing simple tasks. After they were arranged by New Flyer to be put into various basic tasks, New Flyer's progress in all aspects was rapidly improved. If someone came to visit the Demon Cloud continent now, they would find that the area under the control of New Flyer was changing day by day. In just half a year, there were various production bases that were similar to the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's main base that kept appearing. Every place was bustling with activity, forming a sharp contrast with the Signs continent that was at war. Chapter 1243. Prince Raymond straightened his back and revealed the perfect smile on his face as he walked into the hall filled with people. Due to his constant training, he had a strong and well-proportioned body, which complemented his gorgeous formal attire and fully displayed his outstanding elegance. Diagonally across the table, a group of noble ladies from the kingdom of Encourage all looked at him with burning gazes, as if they wanted to swallow Prince Raymond whole at any time. This was the Antilla Kingdom's royal palace, but when Prince Raymond came here, it was like he had come to the Lampari Kingdom's royal palace. His expression was natural, not like he was a guest at all, because he came here this time to attend the surrender ceremony of the Antilla Kingdom. As a representative of the Lampari Kingdom, he had the qualifications to act like a host. Because after the surrender ceremony was signed, it meant that the Antilla Kingdom had surrendered to the Lampari Kingdom, joining the Lampari Kingdom. After 2.5 years of war, the Lampari Kingdom had finally defeated the Antilla Kingdom, forcing them to surrender. For the Lampari Kingdom, this was without a doubt a feat worthy of praise. It had to be known that in the several hundred years of history since the Lampari Kingdom was founded, even if they had great achievements like destroying the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom, because the Lampari Kingdom had relied on the help of the New Flyer, no one recognized them. But this time, the Lampari Kingdom had relied on their own strength to defeat the Antilla Kingdom. The New Flyer had always maintained a neutral stance in the war, never deliberately helping the Lampari Kingdom. Of course, the people of the Antilla Kingdom definitely wouldn't believe it. Prince Raymond's gaze fell on the faces of the high-ranking officials of the Kingdom of Antilla who were waiting for him. He found that their smiles were very forced, and many of them had a trace of unwillingness and viciousness that they didn't try to hide. He couldn't help but laugh. So what if they weren't convinced? The truth was that the Antilla Kingdom couldn't resist the Lampari Kingdom and had already been conquered. Even if there were still some opposing forces in the Antilla Kingdom, it was already a small problem that wasn't worth mentioning and wouldn't affect the big picture. Thinking of this, the smile on Prince Raymond's face became even wider as he walked over to the representatives of the Antilla Kingdom. However, he had only taken a few steps when he suddenly felt a special gaze from the surrounding crowd. He could not help but turn his head to look at the source of the gaze. However, he only saw an unremarkable girl hidden in the crowd. Although her clothes were luxurious, she didn't seem that different from the noble ladies of the Antilla Kingdom. But when the girl raised her hand and made a strange gesture, Prince Raymond's eyes narrowed. She then nodded to Prince Raymond and turned to leave. Prince Raymond's footsteps before he continued walking. Even though there were a few ministers from the Kingdom of Encourage who tried to create some obstacles, they were all resolved by Prince Raymond. In the end, the situation had already been decided, and the Antilla Kingdom couldn't resist at all. When it was deep into the night, the ceremony and banquet that had lasted for several hours finally came to an end. Prince Raymond declined everyone's invitation and directly left the Antilla Kingdom's royal palace. After leaving the royal palace, he took the motorcade of the Lampari Kingdom, but they didn't head to the embassy that the Antilla Kingdom had already prepared. Rather, they drove out of the Antilla Kingdom's royal city. They came to a place that was around 3 kilometers away from the royal city's west gate, and the motorcade stopped by a small river. Prince Raymond got out of the car and walked to another normal-looking magic sedan that was parked by the river. He casually opened the passenger door and sat down. "Hey, Raymond, you weren't pulled away by that Antilla noble miss?" The person in the driver's seat turned around and asked Prince Raymond this question with a smile that was like a flower. If someone was here, they would definitely be very surprised, because this person was actually the new Flyers chairman, Freya. Prince Raymond gave a shrug. "Freya, if you're looking for me, even if there are many noble misses who invite me, I can only reject them." In front of Freya, his tone wasn't like the gentle and dignified, just and benevolent prince that the people of the Lampari kingdom knew at all. He was very relaxed. Freya looked at him and shook her head. "It's not suitable for you to say this to me. Other than that, your son is already 2 years old. Don't have any random thoughts of being a playboy." Hearing Freya mention his son, Prince Raymond's face lit up with happiness. Hather can already run around. I think that in a few years, I'll be able to bring him around to play." After pausing, he revealed a bitter smile. "Speaking of being a playboy, I'm not that interested. But Mother has always wanted me to find a few more, and it would be best if I could have a few more children. So she has always encouraged me." Freya gave a soft snort. "Aunt 70 wants to hold a few grandsons that much. She's thinking about the bloodline of our Lampuri royal family. I can understand that." Prince Raymond defended 70 again. Freya looked at Prince Raymond and shook her head. "Forget it. You royal family people have different thoughts from us normal people. I'm too lazy to care that much." Prince Raymond looked at Freya, thinking that a new Flyers chairman like you isn't a normal person. Then he thought of another problem. "Freya, speaking of this, when are you planning to get married? You're already 30 this year." "Shut up," Freya fiercely reprimanded. "You're a prince. Don't you know that it's impolite to discuss a woman's age?" Prince Raymond helplessly spread his hands. "But you have to admit this problem, right? I think that even Uncle Sue and Auntie Steele must be worried. Haven't you considered it? I say, you are a respected prince, the future king of the Lampari kingdom. Can you care about the important matters you should care about? Why are you asking me these questions?" Freya glared at him. "You want me to get married? All right. As long as you can find a man as outstanding as my father, or just a bit worse, I'll agree. Can you find one?" Prince Raymond revealed a bitter smile. Sue, he had already become a legend in signs. Whether it was his personal archmagus or his career as the new Flyer, he had already reached the peak of this world. How could there be another person that could compare to him? All right, time is precious. Let's stop talking nonsense and get down to business. Freya cleared her throat and continued. "Raymond, your Lampari kingdom still doesn't plan to develop aviation? I received news yesterday that the Kanla Empire has already launched their 6th satellite. The Malar Empire also launched their 5th last month. If you give them some time, I believe that they will be able to establish a complete satellite monitoring network. When that time comes, the other countries that don't have such things will suffer a big loss, especially your Lampari kingdom. Don't look at how glorious it is now after swallowing the Karaj kingdom. In fact, the gap between the two empires has already widened. If you don't do your best to catch up, the gap will only grow bigger in the future." Prince Raymond was silent for a long time before asking, "Is this your idea or Uncle Sue's?" "It's my idea. Father has long stopped asking about signs. It's not like you don't know." Prince Raymond was silent for a bit before giving a sigh and saying with a bitter smile, "Actually, I've already thought of this problem. I also feel that our Lampuri kingdom should develop the aviation industry and can't fall behind too much. But Mother, Freya looked at Prince Raymond for a while before her eyes suddenly turned, and she said with a smile, "Tell me, Aunt 70 hasn't been willing to develop aviation all these years. Is she still angry with my father?" Prince Raymond looked at Freya. He wanted to refute this, but when he opened his mouth, he couldn't refute at all. Since Sue returned to the Signs continent 3 years ago and promoted the space program, there were many countries on the continent that began developing their aviation industry. The two empires had already sent their first man-made satellite into the sky last year. As a magic machine industry that wasn't inferior to the two empires, The Lampari Kingdom was even more outstanding in many aspects. They should have developed their aviation industry very quickly. But the Lampari Kingdom didn't seem to care about aviation. Not only did they not develop it, they even resisted it. All of this came from Queen Seveni's inexplicable resistance to aviation. No one knew why the wise and far-sighted Queen Seveni would resist aviation. Only Freya and Prince Raymond could guess some clues. When Sui returned to Signs to promote the space program, he had gone to many countries, but he had missed the Lampari Kingdom. Even when he stayed in Bana City for 5 days, he didn't meet with Seveni. So Freya and Raymond guessed that Queen Seveni was clearly angry because of this, so she wasn't willing to develop aviation. Prince Raymond didn't want to admit this guess because in his heart, his mother had always worked hard for the Lampari Kingdom. She was a good queen who didn't care about personal benefits. How could she delay the national policy of the Lampari Kingdom because of some little girl's anger? But in this situation, there was no other explanation. However, what really troubled Prince Raymond was that even if his mother really didn't want to develop aviation because of this, he couldn't think of a way to solve it. He couldn't just kidnap Sui in front of his mother and have him admit his wrongs, right? His heart skipped a beat as he looked up at Freya in front of him. Freya took the initiative to talk to him about this problem. Could it be that she had a way to solve it? Chapter 1244. It was a pity that Freya didn't have a way to solve this problem. But she did give a temporary solution to the space program, which was to share the signals of the New Flyer's satellites with the Lampari Kingdom, so that the Lampari Kingdom wouldn't fall behind the two empires or the other countries in terms of space communication. Prince Raymond was very interested in this solution, but he still couldn't give Freya a definite answer. This matter can't be hidden from Mother. I'm not certain that she'll agree. Prince Raymond was very helpless, but I can give it a try. I'll go back and talk to Mother first. If she doesn't forcefully stop me, then we can have a proper discussion. Then let's do this for now. Freya gave a shrug. Prince Raymond gave a sigh. He looked at Freya's beautiful face under the night light, and his heart skipped a beat as he asked, "Right? I still haven't asked. Why did you suddenly come here this time? Didn't the Angela Kingdom announce their surrender to you? For such an important matter, of course I had to personally take a look." Freya replied with a relaxed look. Prince Raymond didn't believe that Freya would come all the way to the Angela Kingdom's royal palace and choose this time just to take a look. Moreover, based on how Freya appeared in the Angela Kingdom's royal palace, it was clear that she had hidden her identity. With her status as the New Flyer's chairman, she would be treated as an honored guest no matter which country she went to. Now that she had hidden her identity, it was clear that she had other plans. But Freya wasn't willing to say anything, so it wasn't convenient for him to keep asking. The two talked about the cooperation between the New Flyer and the Lampari Kingdom before Freya said that they were done here and sent Prince Raymond out of the car. Seeing Freya's magic sedan disappear into the darkness on the other side of the river like a ghost, Prince Raymond rubbed his nose with a bitter smile. He thought that this half-sister of his was living a much better life than him as a prince. With her current status as the president of the New Flyer, she could still do whatever she wanted, but he had to get his mother's approval no matter what he did, so he was under a lot of restrictions. It was even said that Sui had always told Freya that she could resign from her position as the president of the New Flyer whenever she wanted, and Sui wouldn't interfere. What about him? As the only prince of the Lampari Kingdom, he was destined to be the next king of the Lampari Kingdom. But this also meant that he couldn't avoid such an important responsibility even if he wanted to. If I were to become the king and hold the power in my hands, it would be fine to bear the responsibility. But now that Mother is in control of everything, what can I do? Prince Raymond sighed softly, adjusted the expression on his face, and turned around to return to his personal convoy. Half a month later, there was a company that wasn't that famous in the Lampari Kingdom that reached a secret agreement with a New Flyer. There weren't many people who knew about this agreement, but the content was very important. According to the agreement, this company would rent 6 satellites from the New Flyer and share signals with the New Flyer. Moreover, after this, the New Flyer would help this company launch 2 satellites that belonged to them. At the same time, They would provide a series of related equipment to ensure that this company had the ability to control these two satellites. Because the agreement was signed in a very secret situation, this news didn't attract too much attention. But a month after this, there was a piece of news in the Lampari Kingdom that attracted the attention of all the signs. Her Majesty 70, after taking the throne and ruling the Lampari Kingdom for 39 years, she suddenly announced her abdication and gave the throne to her only son, Prince Raymond. This news made everyone feel very surprised and puzzled. Although Her Majesty 70 was over 60 this year and could be considered old, she had always been healthy and there had never been any news of her being seriously ill. According to everyone's estimates, she could still rule the Lampari Kingdom for another 10 or even 20 years. But now that there was no internal turmoil in the Lampari Kingdom and they had just conquered the Antilla Kingdom, why would Her Majesty 70 abdicate? There were many people who suspected that Prince Raymond had secretly rebelled, forcing Her Majesty 70 to abdicate. But there were many people who snorted at this guess. Queen 70 had ruled the Lampari Kingdom for all these years, developing the Lampari Kingdom from a small country in the southwest of the continent to a country that occupied a large amount of land in the southwest of the continent. It was an important country in the Signs continent, even being able to compete with the two empires. It could be said that her achievements were shocking, and she could be considered the greatest queen in the history of the Lampari Kingdom. Adding in the fact that she had ruled for all these years, the Lampari Kingdom had developed quickly and the lives of the citizens had improved each year. It was incomparably different from before she ruled. So Queen 70's prestige in the Lampari Kingdom was unparalleled, and no one could compare to her. Even if Prince Raymond had the idea of rebelling, who would be willing to follow him? Then again, he was Queen 70's only son. He was the heir to the throne of the Lampari Kingdom, without a doubt. He didn't need to worry about anyone stealing his inheritance. He could just wait for Queen 70 to grow old and naturally inherit the throne. Why would he do something so risky and disgraceful? No matter what the outside world guessed, the transfer of the Lampari Kingdom's throne went very smoothly. After Her Majesty 70 abdicated, she would often appear in public for the first 3 months, participating in various national policies. But after that, she appeared less and less, slowly reducing her participation in politics. In the end, after half a year, Queen 70 announced that she could confidently hand the Lampari Kingdom to Raymond before disappearing from public view. No one knew where she went. Hashtag. Sue, he looked at 70, standing in front of him with a strange look, not knowing what expression he should use to deal with her. Hey, Sue, what's with that expression? You don't welcome me? 70 had a relaxed smile on her face. How could I not welcome you? Sue, he shook his head. He pulled over a chair beside him and signaled for 70 to sit down. I'm just curious. Why aren't you staying in the Lampari Kingdom? Why did you come all the way to my place? Sue, and 70 weren't in the Signs or the Demon Cloud continent. Rather, it was an island that Steele had carefully picked for Sue Yi's family to live on. This island wasn't far from Space Island, being around 400 kilometers away, but it was over 6,000 kilometers away from the Signs. 70 had suddenly crossed 6,000 kilometers and appeared in front of Sue E. How could he not be surprised? What is strange about this? 70 said with a faint smile. 70 said with a faint smile, I don't believe that you don't know that I've already abdicated. I know, but this has nothing to do with you suddenly running so far away, right? Of course it's related. I'm no longer the queen of the Lampari Kingdom. According to what you said, I'm unemployed and have nothing to do. Since I have nothing to do, isn't it normal to see an old friend? 70 said with a faint smile. If you really wanted to see me, it wasn't like you didn't have a chance before. So he rolled his eyes. Running over now, aren't you afraid that I'll chase you out as someone who's here to make a living? 70 couldn't help laughing. Sue E., after not seeing you for so many years, you're still as funny as ever. That's right. It's been many years. Sue E. looked at 70 and suddenly said with a sigh. 70 also fell silent. She didn't say it casually when she said that they hadn't seen each other in many years. In fact, over 10 years ago, The two of them had greatly reduced the number of times they met in real life. After that, they didn't even use long-distance magic communication anymore. He had always been busy with the matters of the Demon Cloud continent, so he didn't have a chance to contact the Lampari Kingdom. As for the cooperation between the New Flyer and the Lampari Kingdom, it was all handled by Freya and the other members of the New Flyer, so he didn't have anything to do with it. The best chance for the two of them to meet was 3.5 years ago, when he returned to Signs and attended Heinz's funeral in Banda City. However, in those 5 days, he didn't take the initiative to meet Seveni, and Seveni didn't immediately rush over to meet like before, so the two of them missed each other again. Accurately speaking, including today, we haven't met in real life for 8 years, 7 months, and 21 days. Seveni said in a soft voice. The last time we met was for teacher Carmilla's 100-year birthday. He never thought that Seveni would remember the time this clearly. After being surprised, he said with a sigh, "If it wasn't for grandfather's birthday, I wouldn't have invited that many guests and we might not have met." Seveni looked at and said with a sigh, "You have to know, you didn't even come to Raymond's wedding 4 years ago. You just had Freya come as a representative." Hearing the hidden bitterness in Seveni's voice, said with a bitter smile, "There was no other way. The matters of the Demon Cloud continent were at a critical juncture, and I couldn't leave." "So you couldn't even come to your son's wedding?" He was surprised, and his eyes popped out as he stared at Seveni. Chapter 1245. What is there to be surprised about? Didn't Steele already tell you? Seveni had a calm look. "I'm no longer the queen of the Lampari Kingdom, so there's no need to hide this matter. Actually, I should have told you earlier, but I kept delaying it until now. Speaking of this, I was actually worried." Looked at Seveni in a daze and unconsciously asked back, "Worried about what?" "Worried that you wouldn't admit it." Seveni looked at "I'm certain that Raymond is our child because I've only had intimate contact with a man like you once in my life. But you don't know that with your personality, you'll definitely be suspicious, right?" He was silent. Indeed, even now, he wasn't certain that Raymond was really his and Seveni's son. Although in the cooperation between the Frestac Chamber of Commerce and the elves in the past few years, there was already a method based on soul magic, which was essentially a blood relationship test that could determine parentage. It was impossible for to pull Raymond to do this test with him, so he could never be certain. Seeing the expression on Yi's face, Seveni gave a sigh before continuing. Our relationship gradually drifting apart. Was it related to this?" He looked at Seveni. He wanted to admit that it was related, but he couldn't harden his heart to nod. After finding out that Raymond was likely his and Seveni's child, he had some prejudices against Seveni. To him, Seveni didn't hesitate to drug him just to have a child that was related to him by blood. Like this child would definitely become the king of the Lampari Kingdom, and he would take care of him because he was his child, so he would take care of the Lampari Kingdom. It had to be said that this was a very common scheme, and could understand why Seveni did this. But he didn't like this method. After confirming this through his private investigation, gradually distanced himself from Seveni. Of course, this was not the main reason. He shook his head. "Our relationship is estranged mostly because of our different standpoints. You're the queen of the Lampari Kingdom, so you have to think about the Lampari Kingdom in everything you do. I'm the president of the New Flyer, so I have to think about the New Flyer. Different standpoints would naturally lead to different opinions, and conflicts would naturally occur. I don't want us to end up as ordinary friends, so it's better to meet less and do things as professionally as possible. What about now? You're no longer the chairman of the New Flyer, and I am no longer the queen of the Lampari Kingdom. Can we still be normal friends like before?" Seveni asked. Revealed a faint smile. "If I really wasn't willing, Steele wouldn't have brought you here, right? Hey, I spent a lot of effort to convince Seveni to come here to see you. If you don't thank me, could it be that you're blaming me?" Steele popped out from an unknown corner. "How could I blame you? I can't even thank you enough." He laughed. "Seveni is one of the few good friends I have left. Now that we have a chance to sit down and chat and relive the past, that is the best thing. You also feel the same? Seveni revealed a smile. She looked around before giving a long sigh. Actually, after coming here, I found that I realized it too late. Life here is so relaxed. If I had given the throne to Raymond earlier, I would have been able to enjoy the same relaxed life as you and Steele. Right, Seveni, I never asked. Why did you suddenly decide to give the throne to Raymond? Steele asked in a curious voice. Sui also had a look of concern. He thought that Seveni would be like the queen of the British Empire on Earth, ruling the Lampari kingdom until she died of old age. Prince Raymond might be like the tragic prince on Earth, being the crown prince for several decades without being able to inherit the throne. But he never thought that Seveni would suddenly abdicate, giving the throne and all the power of the Lampari kingdom to Prince Raymond. It's not sudden. Seveni shook her head. Actually, when Raymond got married, I already had this idea. I've been training Raymond over the years, letting him participate in politics and making decisions so that he could smoothly inherit the throne. Now that I feel that the time is right, I'm giving the throne to him. Isn't this very normal? No, Seveni, I understand you. Even if you already had this idea, if it wasn't because you were stimulated, you wouldn't suddenly make this decision. Sui said in a certain voice. Seveni was silent for a bit before giving a bitter laugh. All right, Sui, you're the only one who understands me the most in this world. That's right, I was indeed stimulated. Moreover, this stimulation is related to you and Steele. Sui and Steele were surprised. How is it related to us? Ask your good daughter Freya. Seveni said with a smile. Seveni said with a smile. If it wasn't for her telling me that Raymond didn't agree with me on promoting the space program and secretly complaining that I was too stubborn, making him have scruples about doing many things, how could I suddenly have this idea? Sui and Steele were even more surprised. Freya said this to you? Steele looked a bit angry. How could she say this in front of you? This is too outrageous. No, after I seriously considered it, I felt that her words were very reasonable. Now that I've given the Lampari kingdom to Raymond, I can relax and do whatever I want. Look, I ran here to see Sui. Seveni looked relaxed, not caring at all. She turned to Sui after saying this. Sui, it seems like Freya isn't willing to live a peaceful life. You have to be prepared. Without waiting for Sui to say anything, Steele knit her brows. What do you mean by this? Sui stopped Steele and shook his head with a bitter smile. I know. This daughter's personality has been like this since she was young. It would be strange if she was obedient. Of course, with the current sign situation, being obedient isn't a good thing, right? That's right. Seveni gave a slight nod. So I'll give the Lampari kingdom to Raymond and let him and Freya deal with the signs that are currently in chaos. Hashtag, 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 saying that the signs were in chaos wasn't an exaggeration at all. Although the Lampari kingdom had conquered the Angela kingdom, the follow-up work was far from over. Now that half a year had passed, there would be some rebel groups that would appear from time to time in the Encaraj kingdom. They would disrupt the peace of the Encaraj kingdom and make the Lampuri kingdom very worried. However, compared to this, the Lampari kingdom situation was already very peaceful. The situation in the other parts of the signs was even worse. The southeast corner of the continent. The Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom's offensive had been very smooth in the past 2 years. Not only did they break through the Chino Kingdom's capital in one fell swoop, they easily took over most of the Chino Kingdom's territory and continued their offensive in the north. Soon, they controlled the entire southeast corner of the continent. However, after this, the countries in the southeast corner of the continent formed a resistance alliance, uniting the countries in the east to resist the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom. In the past few years, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom had been in a stalemate with the resistance forces of these countries. The flames of war continued in the southeast corner of the continent and the east corner of the continent. In the center of the continent, since the Kamla Empire and the Malar Empire officially started their war, the flames of war had spread to more than half of the Sign's land. In the past year alone, the armies of the two empires had more than 4 large-scale battles with more than 100,000 people, and there were more than 100 small-scale battles. The small countries that were affected were innumerable. The flames of war not only spread to the borders of the two empires, but also extended to the center of the continent, covering half of the continent. However, the two empires had a tacit understanding. They never really mobilized the power of the entire country and entered an all-out war. They only maintained a fighting stance and fought from time to time. However, they never stopped their development because of this. Affected by the war, the development of the magic industry in the signs inevitably slowed down. However, the various industries related to the military had achieved outstanding growth, especially in the field of military magic machines. The two empires would take out new military magic machines every once in a while, showing that their technology had made another breakthrough. At first, it would take a year or two, but in the past 2 years, it would only take a few months. Because of the pressure of the war, the two empires and the other countries of the continent had a greater desire for magic machine technology, so they invested even more in research and development. If it was said that in the past 10 years of peace, the magic machine industry and the signs had quickly developed, but in the recent years of war, the signs welcomed a new explosion in magic technology. On Earth, when historians analyzed history, they would say that war was the greatest driving force for technology development. This point was perfectly displayed in this world. But no one knew what the final development was. 70 didn't know, and Sue E also didn't know. Chapter 1246. A giant transport magic ship slowly came to the port on the east coast of the New Flyers Demon Cloud continent base. As soon as it stopped, the connecting boards came down, and the large group of people waiting on the deck couldn't wait to rush out. This 100,000-ton transport magic ship that came from the Kandra Empire's Toria province on the Signs continent, which was now the Toria Autonomous Region's southern harbor, had been on the endless seas for 13 days. The people on the ship had been drifting on the endless seas for 13 days, almost not seeing land. Now that they had finally reached the Demon Cloud continent, of course they weren't willing to stay on the ship for a second longer. The reason why they chose to take the transport magic ship and not the passenger magic ship, other than because the passenger magic ship's frequency was too low and the price was too high, the most important reason was that there were just too many people. Just this transport magic ship had over 3,000 people. Great magician Le Man tightly held the hands of his wife and children as he was surrounded by the crowd. In the end, he had no choice but to use his magic to create a small barrier around himself and his children, preventing them from being separated by the crowd. When the family finally walked out of the most crowded place, Great Magician Le Mang looked around with a strange expression. It turned out that there was a huge square outside the pier, and in the square, there was a row of tents lined up. There were all kinds of huge banners written on them, and they looked like stalls. But based on the large banners and the words written in the Signs common language, these weren't stalls, but rather the recruitment banners for the various companies of the Demon Cloud continent. Looking around, one could see all kinds of strange company names. One thing that Great Magician Le Mang cared about was that in these names, there were elves, dwarves, pygmy, wyverns, and other words that represented races. It immediately showed everyone what race this company belonged to. Of course, most of the companies were labeled as human. There were large groups of people gathered in front of each company's recruitment banquet, making it look very lively. However, after looking around for a while, Great Magician Le Mang didn't see the banner of the company he cared about the most, so he couldn't help feeling a bit strange. After thinking for a while, he pulled over a man who looked like a dock worker and asked, "Excuse me, why don't I see New Flyers recruitment point?" The man looked over Great Magician Le Mang and gave a laugh. "Are you joking? New Flyer didn't need to set up a recruitment booth here. Those who wanted to apply for a job at New Flyer could just go to the New Flyer base. Of course, you have to be qualified first." After saying this, the man left. Great Magician Le Mang was a bit surprised. Looking down at himself, he found that because he hadn't changed his clothes for over 10 days and didn't even have a place to take a bath, he was already in a sorry state. He couldn't display the bearing of a great magician at all. So it was no wonder that man was so rude to him. After all, he had never been treated so coldly in the Chino kingdom. But when he thought of the Chino kingdom, great magician Lemang couldn't help letting out a sigh. The Chino kingdom had already disappeared in history and couldn't be found anymore. 3 months ago, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom gathered their army once again and started a war with the Alliance Army in the north of the Chino Kingdom. The Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom won and drove the Alliance Army out of the Chino Kingdom, achieving a complete occupation of the Chino Kingdom. Thus, the Chino Kingdom was officially declared dead. Long before this decisive battle, great magician Lemang had already brought his wife and child away from his home and lived in seclusion in the Liatuvian Duchy to the west. He had hoped that the Alliance Army would be able to repel the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom and restore the Chino Kingdom to its original state, so he could return home with his wife and child. But after hearing the news of the Alliance Army's defeat and the Chino Kingdom's destruction, he immediately extinguished that hope in his heart. Returning to the Chino Kingdom that was already occupied by the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom was impossible. Although he was a great magician and a famous magic engineer in the Chino Kingdom, as long as he was willing, he could definitely find a stable and high-income job in the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom. But because he and his wife's parents were buried in the flames of war between the Chino Kingdom and the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, he was filled with hatred for the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom and naturally wouldn't be willing to work for them. And if he ran to another country on the continent, he wasn't too willing. Just as he was hesitating, he accidentally saw an advertisement on the Demon Cloud continent in the newspaper and had the idea of moving his family to the Demon Cloud continent. In any case, the signs were now filled with the flames of war. Rather than staying here in turmoil, it was better to run to the Demon Cloud continent that was tens of thousands of kilometers away. He had already seen some reports on the Demon Cloud continent in the newspaper, saying that the new continent was now completely controlled by the new flyer and had completely stabilized. Although the development there wasn't as good as the signs, at least it was far better than the signs in terms of peace. Thus, great magician Lemang secretly contacted the people of the new flyer and confirmed that he would be able to get a good job in a new flyer after coming to the Demon Cloud continent. Thus, he made the decision to cross the endless sea with his wife and family and come here. But after coming here with great difficulty, he found that because he had lost his magic communicator on the ship, he couldn't contact the people in the new flyer responsible for receiving him. It was a bit troublesome. It looks like I'll have to make a trip to the new flyer base. Great magician Lemang collected his thoughts and looked up. He easily found the direction to the new flyer base through a few very obvious signs. Just as he was about to call his wife and family to set off, a loud voice suddenly sounded in the square, covering the surrounding noise. Great magician Lemang, please go to the guest service center at the docks after hearing this. The staff is looking for you. After repeating this 3 times, the voice disappeared. The surrounding people only paused for a moment before going back to what they were doing, as if they were already used to this situation. Great magician Lemang was filled with joy. He didn't need to ask anyone this time, and just used the signs to easily find the guest service center at the docks. As soon as he walked in, a figure charged over. Great magician Lemang, I finally see you. I couldn't contact you this entire time. I was worried to death. The person who charged over was the person who had contacted great magician Lemang before, the person responsible for receiving him on the Demon Cloud continent from the new flyer. It was a young girl. Great magician Lemang revealed an apologetic smile. I accidentally lost my magic communicator on the ship. You lost it? The girl blinked. Could it be that someone stole it? Great magician Lemang's expression was a bit awkward. I don't know either. I just found that it was gone when I woke up one morning. As a great magician, his magic communicator had been stolen by someone. This really was a shameful matter, so of course he wasn't willing to admit it. The girl thought about it and revealed a faint smile. She didn't ask anything as she turned to look at great magician Lemang's wife and son, warmly greeting them. Then she led them out of the guest service center and into a magic sedan that was already waiting outside. Finally contacting the staff of the new flyer, great magician Lemang and his wife let out a sigh of relief. After getting in the car, he finally had the time to look around. When he was on the ship, he found that this dock was bigger than the dock on the southern coast of the Toria province. Now that he had driven out of the dock, he found that the streets were connected and there were tall buildings. There was a lot of traffic and pedestrians, making it a prosperous scene. Before coming to the Demon Cloud continent, although he had used various methods to understand the Demon Cloud continent, because of the impression in his heart, he had always thought that the Demon Cloud continent was a desolate place. He was already prepared to live a hard life here. Who would have thought that now that he was here, he would find that not mentioning the other places, just the dock and the surrounding area, it wasn't that different from the Kamla Empire's capital, Wimbledon City, that he had been at twice before. Even looking at it from another angle, Wimbledon City still had many old things from before, so it had a bit of an old feeling. But here, it was filled with new products that had a strong modern feel to it. Although Great Magician Lemang was already in his 40s, his mind was still young. If he had to choose, he liked this modern feel more. Of course, this was related to his profession. While the magic sedan drove, the girl in charge of the reception gave a simple introduction to Great Magician Lemang. The new flyer gave special treatment to Great Magician Lemang, who was powerful and had enough skills, as well as having a reputation in the signs. Not only would they take care of Great Magician Lemang's work, they would also help him settle down his wife and children. For example, the most direct manifestation of this was that after he officially joined, he would be given a villa that had all kinds of facilities, allowing him to live in it without worry. Great Magician Lemang was very satisfied with this. When the receptionist girl drove him and his wife to the villa that had been assigned, he was even more satisfied. The exterior of the villa was beautiful and luxurious, and the surrounding environment was quiet and pleasant. The interior was fully equipped with all kinds of household magic machines, and even the furniture, bedding, and the like were all very well prepared. He and his wife could move in as soon as they arrived, and there was no need to prepare anything at all. This kind of thoughtful arrangement made Great Magician Lemang feel that this trip wasn't in vain. It also made him want to work for the Frestek Chamber of Commerce. So when his wife and children settled down and his wife took him to take a bath, he couldn't wait to tell the receptionist that he wanted to immediately start working. "Your Excellency, Great Magician, you've just arrived today, so you should rest for a day. Tomorrow morning, I'll come pick you up and take you to take care of the paperwork while also getting to know your work. What do you think?" Great Magician Lemang thought about it and didn't insist, but he still had a question in his heart that he wanted an answer to. "I saw a report in the Signs newspaper last month that you. New Flyer was planning a manned space experiment. What is the situation now?" The receptionist girl revealed a faint smile. "This is the company's secret. I can't casually say it. But I can tell you some not-so-secret news. Just the day before yesterday, the first batch of astronauts returned. Returned safely? All of them? Yes." Great Magician Lemang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart. The various countries in the Signs were still fighting each other, and their exploration of space had stopped at the launch of man-made satellites. But the new flyer could already allow people to fly into space. Turning his head to look at the gradually darkening sky outside the window, Great Magician Lemang suddenly felt that his decision to take this risk to come to the Demon Cloud continent was incomparably correct. Only by coming here, as one of the few experts in the Signs who focused on studying space magic, he could finally use his skills. Chapter 1247. In the endless darkness, there was a little bit of bright light flickering, and in the front left, a huge fireball was constantly emitting dazzling light. Looking straight ahead, there was a larger ball with many places that seemed to be covered by a layer of faint white gauze. Most of this ball was an intoxicating blue, and a small part was composed of yellow, green, red, and other colors. If an Earthling saw this situation, he would probably blurt out, "Isn't this the Earth?" However, if one looked carefully, they would find that the ball in front of them, which was also covered by blue, was actually very different from the Earth. The continents on the Earth were divided into 3 major continents, namely the Asian continent, the American continent, and the African continent. The rest of the continents, Oceania, and the Antarctic and Arctic were much smaller in comparison. But the continents on this planet were only two particularly obvious and large continents, both of which were long strips on the left and right sides of the planet. Only in the middle of the bottom, there's a much smaller piece of land lying in the middle of the large blue area. Other than that, there were no other continents, only small pieces of land that looked like stars in the sky. In the eyes of Sue-yi, this shape reminded him of an online game that he played when he was still in college on Earth. The shape of the land on this planet was exactly the same as the shape of the land on the planet in the online game. I can't have transmigrated to the Azeroth continent, right? Sue-yi muttered in his heart, turned his head to look at Cassandra, who was floating in space with him, and sent a voice transmission. We are now looking at the backside, which means that it is now night near the west coast of Signs, the east coast of the Magic Cloud continent, and the Levin continent. But it's my first time here, so I didn't see it clearly. You often see it. Tell me, is there anything worth paying attention to on the sunny side now? Nothing special. If there is, I would have told you. Cassandra's lazy voice was transmitted through the magic vibration waves in the magic space in the sky. This was also because Sue-yi and Cassandra were both powerful in magic, so they could do this now. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for ordinary people to survive in space while leisurely observing the planet they were on while chatting. The reason why it was almost impossible and not completely impossible was because Sue-yi turned his head and looked at a huge metal object that was no smaller than Cassandra in her dragon form. This thing was the part of the spaceship that New Flyer successfully launched last month. After the successful launch, most of the first batch of astronauts who flew into space had safely returned to the ground. Now, this part of the capsule was left in the fixed orbit, flying around the planet below like a man-made satellite. According to Sue-yi's plan, after launching a few more spaceships in the future, they would be able to build a space station in the sky. Thinking of this, Sue-yi turned to look at Cassandra with a strange look in his eyes. When Earth was researching and developing aerospace technology, no matter what they wanted to do in space, it was very difficult. It required a lot of investment, and they had to be extremely careful to succeed. There was also a great risk of failure. In this world, because of the existence of the dragons, the New Flyer space program went extremely smoothly. The speed of progress was far beyond Sue-yi's imagination. Let's not talk about anything else. Just take the space station plan as an example. The most powerful countries on Earth joined forces, spent a lot of money, invested a lot of manpower, and a lot of time to finally build a small international space station. Every year, a lot of manpower and material resources were invested just to maintain the International Space Station. But here, the Frestech Chamber of Commerce had only spent 2 years on this plan, and they had finished the first phase in a single year. Then at most, it would take another half a year to build and put the space station into use. The reason for such an exaggerated difference was because of the existence of dragons like Cassandra. The dragons' powerful physical bodies, coupled with their equally powerful magic abilities, allowed them to fly freely in space. So many problems that were incomparably hard for the space scientists on Earth became a piece of cake for the Frestech Chamber of Commerce. With the help of Cassandra and the other dragons, the Frestech Chamber of Commerce could easily obtain the precise data from space. They didn't even need to launch rockets. They could just have the dragons bring some small instruments into space to test, saving a large amount of time and money. Other than that, if the same satellite malfunctioned, it would be very hard for the countries on Earth to repair it. But the Frestech Chamber of Commerce could have the dragons fly into space to repair it, so there was a large difference in the cost of repairing it. In the future, when the space station was built, the daily maintenance and repair could also be handled by the dragons. It was convenient, fast, and very safe. This advantage was something that the space experts on Earth would never have thought of. "Hey, Sue-yi, what are you looking at me for?" Cassandra asked when she felt Sue-yi's strange gaze. "Nothing. I was just thinking, are you interested in building a base in space or something? It would be convenient for you to play in space in the future." "Space base?" Cassandra froze for a moment. Then her pair of huge dragon eyes shone with excitement. Okay. Every time we fly up from the ground and fly back, it's so troublesome." Last time, my people and I came to a space flight competition, but later they all felt that it was too troublesome to fly up and didn't want to come. If there's a space base that can accommodate us, I think they will be very willing to come. So he couldn't help but roll his eyes. This group of dragons had such a heaven-defying body and powerful magic power, but they never used them on the right path. It was a big waste. Cassandra, have you ever thought about building a base on the moon? The moon? Are you talking about Alice? Even after so long, Cassandra's voice was still a little unnatural when she mentioned Alice. Building a base on the moon is probably more troublesome than building a base in space, right? Your Chamber of Commerce doesn't have the ability to fly to the moon now. Just relying on my people and me to carry so many things. It would be exhausting. Of course, I don't want you to carry things all the way there. Even if you are willing, when you get there, do you know how to build a base? He asked again. Cassandra was suddenly speechless. Of course, the physical strength and magic power of the dragons were great, but other things were not worth mentioning. Asking them to build a house and a base was simply torturing them. My plan is mainly based on the teleportation array above Alice. Leyland muttered to himself. Hearing Su Yi's words, Cassandra subconsciously flew back a little. For some reason, she felt that Su Yi was not going to say anything good. But our Chamber of Commerce doesn't have the ability to fly to Alice. You are the only dragon who has been there and has this experience. So, Cassandra, are you interested in flying there again and doing a few more experiments on that magic array? Su Yi's tone was full of temptation, but Cassandra immediately flew far away after hearing it. What a joke. The last time she was teleported back to the ground on Alice, it was the biggest shock she had ever suffered in her dragon life. She didn't want to experience it again when she had nothing to do. However, no matter how far she flew, Su Yi's voice still reached Cassandra's ears through the magic vibration wave. It vibrated the nerves in her ears, allowing her to hear it clearly. If you're willing to try it again, I might have the ability to let you play a supporting role in the 3rd season of Legend of the Dragon. Cassandra's body trembled, and she stopped flying. She stared blankly at Su Yi, who had become very small in the distance. After a while, she gritted her huge dragon teeth and said, Chairman Su, you always keep your words. The smile on Su Yi's face was incomparably pure. Of course. Hashtag Great Magician Lemang had been officially employed in New Flyer for more than half a month. In this half a month, he had been busy every day, but he didn't feel as tired as when he was in Signs. Rather, he felt that his life was very fulfilling. It was different from when he was in Signs. After coming here and joining the New Flyer Aeronautical Research Institute, his daily work was related to the space magic space. He had been doing research on the things he was most interested in. There were no outsiders pointing fingers at his work, and no one mocking him for not producing any results. All the researchers in the Research Institute, from the top researchers like Salader Cray the Sorcerer to the bottom researchers like first-grade Magi, everyone only cared about their own research. They didn't participate in all those boring things. This was the ideal work environment that Great Magician Lemang could only dream about before, but now he had obtained it in New Flyer. Outside of work, Great Magician Lemang was also very satisfied in his daily life. After officially joining the company, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce gave him all kinds of benefits, allowing his wife and children to live a perfect and comfortable life. Moreover, his son and daughter were quickly sent to the New Flyer's own kindergarten and elementary school, receiving the New Flyer's own primary education, so he didn't need to worry about his children. As for his wife, it only took a few days for her to adapt to life here. Moreover, when she saw Great Magician Lemang every day, she was full of praise for the life here. Compared to when they were in the Chino Kingdom, life here was very peaceful. Not only were the humans harmonious, even the other races were friendly. Adding in the pleasant environment, it was easy to obtain all kinds of daily necessities, as well as all kinds of convenient services that Great Magician Lemang could never imagine. His wife quickly threw Signs to the back of her mind and never mentioned returning to Signs again. Chapter 1248. Whether it was his work or his life, Great magician Lemang was very satisfied, so naturally he was in high spirits. Walking on the road, he was no longer in the sorry state he was in when he first arrived. No matter who he met on the road, he would nod to them with a smile and receive a warm smile in return. Today was his day off, and thinking that he hadn't been alone with his wife in a long time, he didn't work overtime and went for a walk with his wife by the docks. "Do you think I should open a flower shop?" His wife, walking beside great magician Lu Meng, suddenly spoke up. "I've looked around the area in the past few days, and there aren't many flower shops. If you choose a suitable location, your business should be quite good. You could decide this yourself. I don't have any objections." Great magician Lu Meng waved his hand and spoke in a magnanimous manner. His monthly salary at the new flyer was 80 gold coins, and adding in the various benefits, his monthly income was over 100 gold coins, so it wasn't much to support his wife opening a flower shop. But after his wife seriously thought about it, she shook her head. "Forget it, we've just arrived, so we shouldn't open a shop right away. It wouldn't be good if others knew about this. Then again, Henry and Havina need someone to take care of them, so it's better if I stay at home." Great magician Lu Meng revealed a faint smile and nodded in agreement with his wife's thoughts. In fact, in his heart, he still hoped that his wife would stay at home and handle the housework with peace of mind. However, his wife had been exiled with him and had experienced more than half a year of turmoil. This made him feel guilty towards her, so it was not convenient for him to refute her decision. Now that his wife had thought it through, there wouldn't be any problems in the future. When he was about to discuss their children with his wife, he suddenly saw a large transport magic ship coming from the distance. "AI, it's another wave of refugees," Great magician Lu Meng said with an emotional sigh. His wife followed his gaze and said with a faint smile, "Actually, they can't be considered refugees when they come here. It's easy to find a job here, the pay is good, and the environment is good. It's much better than staying in the signs. But after all, leaving one's home and coming to another continent over 10,000 kilometers away makes one feel uncomfortable. You'll get used to it after a while. There's nothing uncomfortable about it." Great magician Lu Meng looked at his wife with a bit of a smile. Before coming to the Devil Cloud continent, she was the one he was most worried about, but now she spoke with an experienced tone. Turning to look at the harbor, he found that the large transport magic ship had stopped and groups of passengers were coming out. Seeing the crowd, Great magician Lu Meng thought of the scene when he first came here and secretly let out a sigh. Suddenly, his eyes focused on a person who was getting off the ship. His expression changed slightly. "What's wrong?" His wife noticed that something was wrong with him. "I think." Great magician Lu Meng's expression was a bit uncertain. "You saw an acquaintance?" "An acquaintance?" His wife was a little surprised. They had left their hometown, abandoned everything in the signs, and came to the Demon Cloud continent. It had only been half a month since then. So how could they have any acquaintances? Great magician Lu Meng knit his brows in thought before waving his hand. "I'll go take a look." Seeing great magician Lu Meng walk towards the harbor, his wife quickly followed. The two of them went to the harbor where the large transport magic ship had stopped. There was a large group of refugees coming out of the ship, and they couldn't even stand still from the rush of people. Great magician Lu Meng saw that his wife was almost knocked down by several people and helplessly used his magic to pull his wife into the air. Looking around in the air, he didn't see that familiar figure. Great magician Lu Meng hesitated a bit before adding a sound amplification spell on himself and loudly shouting, "Zaboto! Zaboto! I am Lu Meng. Respond if you hear me." "Zaboto?" His wife was stunned again. His wife was stunned. "You saw him." I just saw a person that was very similar to him." Great magician Lu Meng looked around and repeated what he had just said. As soon as his voice fell, there was a figure that flew out of the crowd to the left and quickly flew in front of great magician Lu Meng. "You are Lu Meng?" Looking at the wrinkled robe and messy hair in front of them, it was clear that he hadn't taken care of it in many days. He looked just like any other refugee. Great magician Lu Meng and his wife stared at him for a while before finally recognizing him. "Zaboto, it really is you." Half an hour later, great magician Lu Meng, his wife, and Zaboto's group of 6 were sitting in a coffee shop near the harbor. "Zaboto, why are you here?" And them. Great magician Luman looked at Zaboto, who looked even worse than when he came to the Demon Cloud continent. Then he looked at Zaboto's family, who were sitting beside him, and felt a bit surprised. When he was young, he studied at a magic academy in the Kamla Empire, and Zaboto was his classmate for 4 years. The two of them had similar personalities and became very good friends. Even if he returned to the Chino Kingdom and Zaboto stayed in his hometown in the southern province of the Kandra Empire, the two of them were separated by over 1,000 kilometers. But because of the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's convenience, the two of them kept in contact and had a good relationship. They would meet each other at least once a year. Zaboto was very clear that he had to escape to the Demon Cloud continent because of the Chino Kingdom. At that time, Zaboto had even invited great magician Luman to the Kamla Empire to help him settle down, but he had been rejected by great magician Luman. At that time, Zaboto had told great magician Luman that although the Kamla Empire was at war with the Malar Empire, the internal situation was stable and the southern province was far away from the war zone. It wouldn't affect him at all, and he would live a good life there. It had only been a little over a month, so why did Zaboto bring his family to the Demon Cloud continent? It's a long story. Zaboto gave a deep sigh, his expression filled with exhaustion. I thought that the Empire and the Malar Empire had been at war for such a long time, but it didn't affect the stability of the Empire. I thought that it would continue in the future, but I didn't think. What? Your Kamla Empire lost? Great magician Luman was shocked. No, the war between the Empire and the Malar Empire has always been stable. This time, the Empire had an internal conflict. That's not right? Great magician Luman's face was still filled with doubt. Even if there was a bit of trouble in the Empire, it wouldn't make a great magician like you bring your family to the Demon Cloud continent, right? The problem is, this isn't just a bit of trouble. It turned out that just last month, the southern province of the Kamla Empire suddenly erupted in turmoil. This turmoil was different from any other turmoil in the history of the Kamla Empire. All the upheavals in history were instigated by the local nobles or even the branches of the royal family. But this time's turmoil was caused by the commoners. To be more accurate, it was the workers. At the beginning, it was a textile factory where the workers were dissatisfied with their pay being cut too much and their overtime being too long, so they went on strike. Later on, the workers in the factory became impulsive, and the guards of the factory accidentally killed 2 workers, causing the workers to riot. After that, the scope of the riot quickly spread. In less than a week, it had spread to the entire southern province. The 2 military magic machine factories that the Kamla Empire had set up in the southern province were also involved. The angry workers killed the higher-ups and the nobles in charge of the factories and took up their own weapons before wantonly distributing them to the other workers in the southern province who had participated in the riot. With the weapons, the workers' fighting power soared, and it didn't take long for them to attack the capital of the southern province, causing the imperial army stationed in the southern province to rebel. In just a month's time, the situation in the southern province had become a mess. As a great magician, Zaboto had more ways of obtaining information than normal people, so he was the first to react. Before the workers turned into rioters and invaded his city, he had already avoided them. His original plan was the same as great magician Luman's. He wanted to find a place to hide and observe the situation. After all, in the history of the Kamla Empire, there had been countless turmoil, but there had never been a time when the foundation of the empire was shaken. However, this time, the situation had greatly exceeded Zaboto's expectations. Although the Kamla Empire had quickly reacted and sent an army to quell the chaos. But this time, the chaos had spread to the entire southern province, and the army that had come to quell the chaos was quickly caught up in it. Speaking of this, the governor's palace hasn't made any moves since the chaos began. Even when the Empire's army was defeated, they didn't make any moves. I don't know if it was intentional. After saying this, there was a trace of hesitation and anger on Zaboto's face. If the southern province's governor's palace had reacted quickly when the chaos began and calmed the situation down, it wouldn't have turned into this situation. However, from the beginning, the southern province's governor's palace had acted as if they didn't care and didn't make any moves, allowing the situation to worsen. Zaberto, did you forget? The Windsor family had just rebelled a few years ago. Great magician Lemang reminded him. You mean? Actually, that isn't important. Great magician Lemang shook his head. Since you've already chosen to come to the Demon Cloud continent with your family, then don't think about the signs anymore. After saying this, Great magician Lemang reached his hand out to Great magician Zaberto with a smile on his face. Welcome to the Demon Cloud continent, Zaberto. Join the new flyer with me. I promise you won't regret it. Zaberto gave a bitter laugh. At this time, do I have any other choice? Chapter 1249. The situation in the Kamla Empire was far worse than what Zaberto said. When he was still in the signs, the situation in the southern province of the Kamla Empire deteriorated. Worker riots swept through the entire province, and even the imperial army sent to suppress the riots was defeated by the workers. Such a situation was already quite serious for many people in the Kamla Empire. However, about 20 days after Zaberto fled the southern province and finally decided to board the ship from the Toria Autonomous Regions port and drifted all the way to the Demon Cloud continent, the situation in the Kamla Empire suddenly became several times more serious. After the worker riots broke out in the southern province, large-scale worker riots also broke out in several other provinces in the Kamla Empire. The most serious one was the Lamask province, and the situation was even more terrible than the southern province. The governor of the Lamask province, Duke Rockefeller himself, unfortunately died in the riots, and the Lamask province, which lost the control of the governor's office, fell into complete chaos. At the same time, the Malar Empire apparently received the news of the civil strife in the Kamla Empire and immediately launched an all-out attack. The Kamla Empire was already unstable because of the civil strife, and they did not expect the Malar Empire to suddenly increase the strength of the attack. They were caught off guard and were forced to retreat. The two legions of the Malar Empire in the north of the empire were almost completely wiped out under the fierce attack of the Malar Empire. Such a fiasco further worsened the bad situation in the Kamla Empire. The governor's office in the southwestern province of the Kamla Empire suddenly announced that because the imperial family and the parliament were militaristic, the people in the empire had no way to make a living. The southwestern province was deeply hurt, and therefore the southwestern province decided to no longer accept the leadership of the empire. To put it bluntly, it meant that the southwest province had declared independence. Before people could react, two other provinces declared independence one after another. In addition to the 7 provinces that were already in the midst of worker riots, there were 10 provinces in the Kamla Empire that suddenly broke away from the empire's control. This scene easily reminded people of 20 years ago, when the New Flyer and the Kingdom of Ruhr attacked the Kamla Empire, and the Kamla Empire was defeated. At that time, the Kamla Empire was also in chaos, and the provinces declared independence one after another. If the New Flyer did not publicly support the imperial family of the Kamla Empire, perhaps even if the imperial family of the Kamla Empire and the New Flyer signed a cooperation agreement, the Kamla Empire would have fallen apart. Now, the Kandra Empire had fallen into the same chaos after 20 years. Would the Frestek Chamber of Commerce show their support for the Kandra Empire's royal family? Father, do you think we should step in? Freya's voice traveled through nearly 10,000 kilometers and entered Su Yi's ears through the magic communicator, revealing a trace of confusion in her voice. Why are you asking me this question? Su Yi asked in return. You are the president of a New Flyer. This decision can only be made by you. I just hope that you, the former president, can give me, the current president, some advice. Hearing the coquettish tone in Freya's voice, Su Yi could not help but laugh. Freya had been the president of a New Flyer for a long time and was already an important figure in the signs. Now that she revealed this side of her, if other people heard it, they would be shocked. My advice? My advice is for you to think about what you want to do first. Does interfering in the affairs of the Kamla Empire benefit you or the new flyer in any way? If it does, then do it. If it doesn't, then why do it? The other side of the magic communicator was silent for a while before Freya gently nodded. Understand. But Freya seemed to hesitate for a moment before continuing. Father, if I do something different from what you thought before, will you be angry? Why would I be angry? Suti could not help but shake his head, but he also knew that Freya could not see. So he put on a very serious tone and said, I already said that the affairs of the signs have nothing to do with me anymore. What this continent will become is their own choice. Right now, I'm more concerned about another matter, so you don't have to bother me with this kind of small matter in the future. Freya, who was tens of thousands of kilometers away, stuck out her tongue. This was an important matter that concerned the survival of the Kamla Empire, but her father said it was a small matter. Could it be that the only important thing in his eyes now was space research? After hanging up the call with Freya, he soon received a new call, but it was from Akali. President, everything is ready here. Come over quickly. Okay, I'll be right there. Half an hour later, Su-E appeared on a small island about 30 kilometers northwest of the space island. This small island was the island where Cassandra was teleported back from after activating the Abyssal Demon's ruins on Alice. Akali, a few of her researchers, and Elder Lysania were all waiting here. When she saw Su-E appear, Akali pointed to the Abyssal Demon's ruins that looked like a stone pillar that was surrounded by them. President, the magic signal that Cassandra sent from Alice has already connected with it. Look, there are already patterns on it. Su-E glanced at it and found that the surface of the stone pillar had indeed turned up a faint light blue light. If one looked closely, they would find that the light blue light reflected some very complicated and delicate patterns. These lights were somewhat similar to the light that Su-E and the others emitted when they first discovered the ruins of the stone pillar and stimulated it with magic power. But Su-E knew that there was a fundamental difference. Now, no one was injecting magic power into the ruins of the stone pillar to stimulate it. Instead, it was Cassandra, who was on Alice 300,000 kilometers away, who was injecting magic power into the Abyssal Demon's ruins on Alice, causing a resonance reaction here. The same experiment had been done many times during this period, and Cassandra had flown to Alice more than 10 times for this purpose. Akali and the others had already analyzed the specific pattern and could even combine it with the teleportation magic mastered by the mages, making the judgment that these ruins were a huge teleportation array. Today, Akali called Su-E, intending to carry out a further and bolder experiment. Elder Lysania, are you really going? Su-E turned to Elder Lysania and asked. Elder Lysania nodded affirmatively. Of course. Being able to know which world the Abyssal Demons went to is very helpful for us elves to study the history of our ancestors. I'm afraid that's not the only purpose. Su-E glanced at her and did not ask any more questions. Instead, he turned to signal Akali to begin. Akali waved her hand, and several researchers immediately activated the equipment that had been prepared long ago. A moment later, the stone pillar of the ruins was covered with a layer of a different kind of light blue light. Su-E focused on sensing the extremely special frequency of magic waves emitted from the stone pillar of the ruins. In his mind, he compared it with the magic waves produced by the teleportation magic that he mastered and then made the corresponding adjustments. Mr. President, the adjustments have been made, Akali suddenly said nervously. Okay, then I'll go. Su-E smiled at her and strode to the center of the equipment and the stone pillar of the ruins. Mr. President, you really want to go? Akali suddenly asked again. Su-E looked at her in surprise, only to see her worried face. He smiled and said, Don't worry. Haven't we succeeded many times before? You see, Cassandra can now eat her favorite snacks on Alice's bed while watching the latest season of Legend of the Dragon, which she starred in. This already proves that our experiment has no problems, right? But the things that were teleported over before were only inanimate objects. Now that living people are teleported over, I'm afraid it will be dangerous. Akali paused and took a step forward. At least, you shouldn't be the one taking the risk, right? If I don't go, are you going to go? Sui asked with a smile and then waved his hand. Okay, my magic power is much higher than yours. If there is danger, it's obviously best for me to go. Besides, Cassandra has successfully teleported back and forth several times, which proves that this is feasible. Seeing that Sui had made up his mind, Akali knew that it was useless to persuade him, so she sighed and retreated to the side. Elder Lysania, if I send back news that I have safely arrived, you can reconsider, okay? Elder Lysania nodded silently. After that, Sui nodded at Akali again. Akali gritted her teeth and slammed the button on the equipment in front of her. The stone pillar of the ruins suddenly shot out a bright blue light that completely enveloped Sui. Sui immediately felt that the magic space around him was rapidly changing, and all the magic elements around him were also moving strangely. He was very familiar with these changes, which were very similar to when he used teleportation in the past. But there were also some subtle differences, which he had felt many times during his experiments. Sui carefully felt these subtle differences while carefully controlling the magic power in his body, trying not to let it affect the changes around him. His previous experiments had been successful because he teleported inanimate objects and did not have any effect on the magic space around him. But now, because he was a magus, it was easy for him to affect the magic space around him. According to Akali's analysis, it was very likely that it would make it difficult for the teleportation to succeed. So now he had to control himself as much as possible in the state of an ordinary person without magic, but he had to maintain the ability to mobilize magic power to protect himself at any time. After a while, Sui suddenly felt that the magic space around him had been distorted to a degree that was enough to cause a change. It's about time, Sui muttered in his heart. In the next moment, he felt that the magic space around him had completely changed into an extremely special state that he had never experienced before. Then, his vision turned black. Logically speaking, it should have been less than 2 seconds, but Sui felt like a long time had passed. A faint light appeared in front of him again. Then, a familiar voice sounded in front of him. Hey, Chairman Sui, welcome to Alice. Chapter 1250. Sui calmed himself, and after seeing the situation in front of him, he was shocked. In front of him was a field of green grass, mixed with red, white, yellow, all kinds of colorful flowers. When the breeze blew, the green grass and flowers swayed slightly with the wind. It looked like a grassland full of lush greenery, and spring was pressing. Looking out, there was a boundless blue sky and white clouds. There was even a sun hanging in the sky, shining down rays of warm sunlight. No matter how one looked at it, this was a very good grassland. But Sui had clearly used the Abyss Demon Race's teleportation array to go from the Signs planet to the moon named Alice. So why was there this scene in front of him? Could it be that the environment on Alice was like this? That's impossible. Sui immediately shook his head. Although he wasn't an astrophysicist, he was very clear on one thing. With a small moon like Alice, it was impossible for it to have enough gravity to leave behind an atmosphere like Earth or the Signs planet. So the scene in front of him definitely wasn't real. What is going on? Sui lowered his head and looked at Cassandra, who had just greeted him. Cassandra wasn't in her dragon form, but rather in her human form. She was currently lying on the grass with a thick cushion under her, propping up her upper body. Her head was half raised, and there was a household magic illusion projector in front of her. She was watching the series on a magic illusion projector while eating a pile of snacks beside her, looking very relaxed. Hey, Chairman Sui, are you scared? Hearing Sui's question, Cassandra giggled. I was indeed scared. Sui nodded. He looked around and closed his eyes to sense it. When he opened his eyes again, his expression was a bit strange. These should be illusions, right? Right, they're illusions. Cassandra got up from the ground and pointed with her finger. It was unknown what she did, but everything around him faded away. What appeared around Sui was a barren stone ground. Sui nodded. This was in line with the situation on the surface of an asteroid without the protection of an atmosphere. These illusions seem to be a function of this teleportation array. I accidentally discovered it. Cassandra explained. Actually, I'm very curious why those abyss demons would make such a function. It has no practical use at all. So he looked around and understood. 10,000 years ago, those abyss demons might not have just built a teleportation array on Alice, but rather a complete moon base. Since it was used as a base, of course it couldn't be empty. The desolate, primitive state of Alice was not suitable for long-term residence. Therefore, the abyssal demons created such an illusion to make them feel better. Based on this, those abyss demons were very similar to humans. Looking around, Sue easily found the scattered stone pillars that were very similar to the ruins of the giant teleportation array on the endless sea. But compared to the giant teleportation array on the endless sea that covered several hundred square kilometers, the teleportation array on Alice was much smaller. At least Sue could see 5 or 6 of them with a single glance. It wasn't like the ones on the endless sea that were separated by several kilometers or even over 10 kilometers. Hey, Chairman Sue, it's your first time coming to Alice. Isn't it very novel? Cassandra seemed very excited about Sue Yi's arrival, jumping in front of her and pointing in a certain direction. Here, look over there, and you can see the Signs Planet. Sue looked in the direction she was pointing, and he saw a giant sphere in the sky. Because he had the experience of seeing the Signs Planet from the sky, Sue recognized it with a single glance. But compared to close space, Alice, that was several 100,000 kilometers away, couldn't see the Signs Planet clearly. He could only vaguely see 2 shadows, which should be the Signs Continent and the Demon Cloud Continent. As for the Lywin Continent in the south, he couldn't see any traces at all. Even if he added in the time he spent on Earth, this was Sue Yi's first time observing a planet from a celestial satellite, so naturally he felt it was very novel. But this thing wasn't that interesting. After looking at it for a while, Sue focused back on the teleportation array. Cassandra, you've been here for so long. Did you discover anything new? I would have already told you if I did. Cassandra blinked before suddenly saying, but there is one that I discovered 2 days ago. I wasn't sure, so I didn't tell you immediately. Oh, what is it? Sue was a bit curious. Come. Cassandra took Sue Yi's hand and flew in the opposite direction. The physical environment on Alice was very different from the Signs Planet, but the magic space wasn't that different. This was different from the magic space in space and the Signs Planet, which was something that Sue felt was very strange. He could only sigh about this. Magic really was a very strange tool. From many aspects, it was much more convenient than science on Earth. After flying for a while, around 3 to 4 kilometers away, Cassandra stopped. Look, Chairman Sue, there is also a teleportation array below. Sue looked down, and as expected, he found several dozen stone pillars scattered on the ground below. Isn't this the same teleportation array as the one before? According to my research, it isn't. Cassandra shook her head in a serious manner. Sue saw the expression on her face and asked, You tried it? The expression on Cassandra's face became even more strange. I tried it. I could make it react, but I didn't dare keep trying. Didn't dare? Why? Sue was a bit curious. Cassandra was a dragon, and one of the boldest dragons he had ever seen. Was there anything she didn't dare do? Because I don't know where I will be teleported, and I don't know if I can come back. Cassandra replied with a bitter smile. For a place as far away as Alice, I can fly back myself, but if I am teleported to a place even further away, like you said, how many light years away, I don't have the ability to fly back myself. Then again, I can't even tell up from down, left from right. How do I know where to fly? That's true. Sue first flew around the newly discovered teleportation array in the sky before carefully observing it. He confirmed that this teleportation array was a smaller version of the one on the endless sea, so it should have the same performance. How did you activate it? Give me the relevant data, Sue said to Cassandra. Cassandra reported some data related to the mana mobilization and magical elements that she used to activate the teleportation array. She then walked to the middle of the teleportation array, took a deep breath, and activated her mana. Sui recalled the various data that Cassandra had just reported to him, and carefully felt the characteristics of the mana that Cassandra was mobilizing and the changes in the mana space around her. After a while, the scattered stone pillars around Cassandra emitted a pale blue light. Sui flew into the air and observed the shape of the light blue light from above for a while, and confirmed again that they were almost exactly the same as the one on the endless sea. However, there were still some differences in some small areas. Looking up, he found that the light blue light emitted by these stone pillars gathered together in the sky above his head, and then spread out to form a light blue curtain that shrouded the space around the teleportation array. This was a scene that Sui did not discover in the teleportation array on the endless sea. But thinking about it, perhaps it was because the teleportation array on the endless sea was too big, so even if there was a similar phenomenon, it would be hard to notice. "Chairman Sui, did you sense it?" Cassandra suddenly asked. Sui nodded, before looking at the center of the teleportation array. There was a very special magic wave that wasn't strong, but it spread out into the depths of the sky. With Sui's current powerful strength, he could sense magic waves that were more than 10 kilometers away. However, the limit of his senses was very small in the boundless space, so he couldn't sense where this special magic wave was going at all. But one thing was certain: the direction of this special magic wave was clearly not the Signs planet. Very soon, with Cassandra's magic, there was a very clear change in the magic space of the teleportation array. Sui could clearly feel that this change was the same as the change he felt when he was experimenting on the Signs Island. He was certain that once this teleportation array was activated, it could send people or objects to another place. Seeing that the magic space was about to change, Cassandra stopped and looked up at Sui in the air. Sui understood her meaning and had her stop. "Chairman Sui, do you understand now why I don't dare activate it?" Sui nodded before giving a sigh. Although the unknown universe is filled with attraction, it is also filled with danger. Who would dare to take such a risk without knowing anything? After pausing, he said, "But Cassandra, I'm certain that on the other side of this teleportation array, there should be another teleportation array left behind by the Abyss demons. As for where it is, I'm not certain. So what if it is? Can you be certain that the other teleportation array can send me back?" Cassandra asked. Sui shook his head with a bitter smile. "Of course I'm not certain. Anyway, I don't dare take this risk." "Chairman Sui, do you dare?" "Of course I don't dare, at least not right now." Sui gave a bitter laugh. He took out a small device from his chest and placed it in the center of the teleportation array before signaling for Cassandra to move back. When Cassandra left the range of the teleportation array, Sui followed the method Cassandra had just demonstrated and easily activated the teleportation array. The device placed in the teleportation array disappeared in front of Sui and Cassandra's eyes. "Can this thing work?" Cassandra asked. "This is a magic signal generator." Sui explained. "When it's sent over, it will send out a special wave of magic signals. If we can receive it, it means that the other side of the teleportation array is safe. What if we can't receive it? Besides, even if it's successfully sent over, the universe is so big. If it's sent to a very distant place, it will take time for the magic signal to be transmitted. Will we receive the signal from it?" Sui could only smile bitterly. "We can only leave it to fate." Chapter 1251. Sui still had things he cared about in this world, so he wasn't willing to take the risk of entering the teleportation array. Cassandra felt that New Flyer had brought her many new interests, making her very happy in this world, so she didn't have the desire to take risks. But Elder Lysania was different from them. After Elder Lysania came to Alice through the teleportation array and understood the situation, she clearly told Sui that she and the entire Izhar tribe had the responsibility of finding the elven ancestors. So even if she knew that the teleportation array was dangerous, she had to continue investigating it. Elder Lasagna's attitude was firm, and Sue, he couldn't go against it, but he suggested that Elder Lasagna wait a bit longer. They had to at least give a magic signal generator some time. If the magic signal generator was activated in a short period of time, it would be enough to prove that the teleportation array was safe. Elder Lasagna agreed with Su Yi's idea, saying that she didn't mind waiting a year or even several years. The elves had long lives, so waiting a few years wasn't considered much for them. But Elder Lasagna strongly requested to join the research team, so Su Yi naturally wouldn't oppose it and quickly agreed. Of course, they wouldn't just wait here. Although no one was willing to take the risk of passing through the teleportation array, just based on a moon base left behind by the demon race on Alice, there were many things worth researching. As for this unknown teleportation array, there was also a lot of research value. With New Flyer's current research on magic, it was no longer like the previous signs who could only give a rough and imprecise description of magic phenomena. Rather, they had the ability to conduct detailed and deep research, ensuring that they understood the principles behind it. If the teleportation array on Alice was in the previous sign's magic system, it would be a miracle that was hard to understand. But for the current New Flyer, because of the research on the sign's planet and Alice's teleportation array, they already had some ideas. Akali believed that as long as she had enough time to research it, she would be able to crack the secret behind it. Once the research was successful, New Flyer would even have the ability to set up the same teleportation array. According to Cassandra's investigation, it showed that the demon race's moon base on Alice had a perfect environment for humans to live in. So after Sui tested it, he decided to send a research team to Alice to study the teleportation array together with a research base on Space Island. Akali didn't say anything else and decided to lead the research team herself. He couldn't win against her, so he could only let her. After all, as a researcher, being able to conduct research on a natural satellite was a very exciting thing. Even on Earth, where science and technology were extremely advanced, it was almost impossible to stay on the moon for research. Even the simplest mission of landing on the moon had been doubted by countless people. Later on, it became a major project that no country could complete. Every time he thought of this, you would feel that it was very strange. 10,000 years ago, the demons of the abyss left this world, but they left behind a very useful and mysterious tool called magic. Now that 10,000 years had passed, the people of the signs under the lead of him and New Flyer began to unearth the true potential and use of magic. Actually, it was very likely that they were climbing up the technology tree of the abyss demons. But because of Su Yi's connection, this technology tree might be different from the technology tree of the abyss demons in the past. As for what the difference was, unless they found the true abyss demons, they would never know. Just as Akali led the research team, and Elder Lasagna transferred a group of elven subordinates from the Azhara tribe to conduct in-depth research on the abyss demons' moon base on Alice, the situation on the signs continued to change drastically. Due to the worker riots in several provinces, as well as the provinces declaring their independence from the Kamla Empire's royal family and the imperial parliament, or even declaring independence, the Kamla Empire once again fell into a large-scale civil war. The entire empire was in a state of turmoil, and the situation was even worse than when the New Flyer and the Kingdom of Ruhr jointly attacked it more than 20 years ago. At this time, countless people were waiting for the New Flyer's reaction. If the New Flyer once again expressed their support for the Kamla Empire like 20 years ago, then the Kamla Empire's internal stability would very likely be restored, and they would be able to overcome the crisis again. Even if the New Flyer could prevent the Malar Empire from attacking the Kamla Empire, with the strength of the Kamla Empire's royal family, they would also be able to gradually assess the internal chaos. However, under everyone's gaze, the New Flyer directly ignored the Kamla Empire's situation and did not express any stance on it. Whether it was in public or in private, the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce's upper echelons expressed their stance on the Kamla Empire's internal affairs. They expressed that this was the Kamla Empire's internal affairs and that the New Flyer was only a chamber of commerce. They did not have the authority, qualifications, or ability to interfere. New Flyer's president, Freya, also expressed in a few public interviews with newspaper reporters that the New Flyer had no intention of interfering with the internal affairs of any country. As for the internal situation of the Kanla Empire, the New Flyer would not do anything. However, at the same time, she also called for restraint in all aspects of the Kanla Empire and tried to keep the dangers of war away from the civilians. For this reason, the New Flyer would unite with other chambers of commerce and organizations to form a rescue team to help the civilians who were threatened by war escape danger. Regarding this stance, many newspapers expressed their condemnation. The New Flyer clearly had this ability, but instead of stopping the deterioration of the Kanla Empire's internal situation, they just hypocritically formed a rescue team. How is this going to help the civilians of the Kanla Empire? It was clearly taking advantage of the war to steal people from the Kanla Empire. The New Flyer had always been shouting that it lacked people on the Demon Cloud continent, but because it was too far away, not many people were willing to go. However, in recent years, because the signs had fallen into war, more and more people chose to go to the Demon Cloud continent because they could not bear the pain of war. Among them, there were many high-level magic researchers and skilled technical workers. Many newspapers had once lamented that if the war continued, the Kanla Empire would lose a lot of talents in all aspects, and the Demon Cloud continent would benefit in the end. Or to put it more bluntly, the New Flyer. Therefore, there were many newspapers that said that the wars on the Signs continent were secretly stirred up by the Frestac Chamber of Commerce. Because no matter how one looked at it, the Frestac Chamber of Commerce didn't suffer any losses from the wars. Rather, they gained the greatest benefits from this, so they had enough reason to do this. Regarding such doubts, the New Flyer expressed strong condemnation. For this reason, the New Flyer released a series of data. The data showed that compared to before the war, the sales of all the New Flyer's products had declined significantly, and it was more obvious year after year. The latest data showed that because of the large-scale civil strife in the Kanla Empire, the sales of all the New Flyer's products had declined severely. As a result, the annual sales of the New Flyer had declined every year. Last year, it had even fallen to almost the same level as 13 years ago, barely exceeding 3 billion gold coins. It had to be known that before the war, the annual sales of a New Flyer had exceeded 5 billion gold coins, which was second to none in the Signs. The war had such a serious impact on the New Flyer, so why did the New Flyer still support the war? Compared to any words, it was clear that data was more intuitive and more convincing. Therefore, after the New Flyer released this series of data, the voices criticizing the New Flyer and the Signs decreased a lot. After all, the New Flyer's response was very reasonable. For any Chamber of Commerce, they certainly hoped to have a peaceful and stable environment so that more people could buy things and the profits of the Chamber of Commerce would increase. The New Flyer had always adhered to the concept of peace, and the previous president, Su Yi, had publicly stated many times that he hoped that the Signs would always be in a state of peace. This would greatly benefit both the New Flyer and the development of the magic machine industry in the Signs. In the end, as soon as Su Yi stepped down as president of the New Flyer and left the Signs, the countries on the continent couldn't wait to start a war. Could they blame it on Su Yi and the New Flyer? Although some people pointed out that if they started a war, the sales of other products would be greatly affected, but the military magic machines would be very popular. The Frestac Chamber of Commerce would sell large amounts of military magic machines to other countries in secret, making a large profit from the war. However, this point of view was immediately overturned. If the New Flyer was willing to do this, then it would be better to directly support one country. With the New Flyer's strength and powerful magic machine industry, if it clearly expressed its support for one of the two empires, the other would have been destroyed long ago. Wouldn't the benefits from this be much greater than just selling the military magic machines? Looking at the current situation in the Signs, whether the New Flyer supported the Malar Empire or the Nozdorma Business Union Kingdom, they could quickly defeat their opponents and obtain great advantages and benefits in the Signs. No matter how you looked at it, it was much better than just selling the military magic machines. The various analyses couldn't explain why the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had this kind of attitude, so everyone was confused. What did the new flyer want to do? Chapter 1252. The new flyer still didn't do anything. Despite facing everyone's doubts, the new flyer wasn't affected by the outside world and continued to follow its own steps. Although the chaos of war had caused the sales of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's products to drop, it wasn't that everyone on the Signs continent was affected by the war. The Frestec Chamber of Commerce's products were still very popular in countless countries and regions, so the Frestec Chamber of Commerce could still earn large amounts of profit from this. Even in the regions affected by the chaos of war, the new flyer's magic machines were still very popular. Even though it was impossible for most merchant guilds to maintain order and sell their products in the chaotic regions, it was still quite difficult for them to do so. However, it wasn't that difficult for the new flyer. On one hand, the new flyer's reputation in the Signs far exceeded that of the other chambers of commerce. Very few people or organizations would think of robbing the places where the new flyer appeared. On the other hand, with the powerful new flyer guards, even if someone wanted to rob them, they wouldn't succeed. As a result, in these chaotic regions, people often looked forward to the appearance of the new flyer merchant fleet. Because as long as the new flyer appeared, it meant that the region was peaceful. Even the armies of the two empires would tacitly agree with this. As for the rebels, none of them had the guts to touch the new flyer. With this powerful rallying power, there were more and more commoners and exiled nobles gathered around the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. Other than most normal people, there were many high-level magic researchers and workers who were skilled in core technology. These people were the talents that had been mentioned in the newspaper before. Compared to ordinary people, these talents were important figures in chambers of commerce, factories, and even local governments before the chaos of war. They had good lives and naturally couldn't tolerate the chaos of war. When they gathered around the new flyer, they were naturally attracted by the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce and gradually leaned towards the new flyer. Some even chose to join the new flyer. There was no other reason other than the fact that new flyer could guarantee their safety at this time. As a result, even if the new flyer did nothing, there were still countless refugees pouring into the safe areas controlled by the new flyer. Some of them simply went to the Demon Cloud continent, far away from the Signs. From this point of view, many newspapers had accused the new flyer of seizing the opportunity to steal talents from the Kamla Empire and other regions. This could not be considered slander. But even if he knew, what could he do? Whether it was the Kamla Empire or the Eastern Alliance countries that were at war with the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom in the eastern part of the continent, none of them could do anything about the current situation. This was especially true for the Kamla Empire. Since the new flyer hadn't made a clear statement, the situation was even worse. In the spring of year 3829 of the Continental Calendar, the Malar Empire once again launched a full-scale attack on the Kamla Empire. They sent more than 200,000 troops in one go, divided into 3 directions, and invaded the Kamla Empire at the same time. The Kamla Empire had to deal with the internal chaos while also dealing with the constant attacks of the Malar Empire. They were already overwhelmed. This time, under the Malar Empire's attack, the Kamla Empire simply couldn't resist and was completely routed. In just 2 months, the northern border of the Kamla Empire had completely fallen. Under the threat of the Malar Empire, the northern provinces of the Kamla Empire that originally belonged to the royal family were either directly occupied by the Malar Empire or simply declared their independence from the Kamla Empire and transferred to the Malar Empire. In another half a year, the Malar Empire's army had completely occupied the northern territory of the Kamla Empire. The army approached the Kamla Empire's capital, Wimbledon City. The Kamla Empire's royal guards and the Malar Empire's army fought for several days before suffering a crushing defeat. The Kamla Empire's emperor saw that the situation was bad, so he led the ministers loyal to him to escape Wimbledon City in the magic airship. The Malar Empire's army took Wimbledon City and the Kamla Empire's royal palace. At this point, the Kamla Empire's capital had fallen. Of the 37 provinces, 13 had surrendered to the Malar Empire 16 had declared independence, and the remaining 8 were still controlled by the workers. There wasn't a single province that accepted the leadership of the Kamla Empire's royal family. At this point, although the Malar Empire hadn't officially announced it, the Kamla Empire had already been destroyed. ##### Freya looked at the Kamla Emperor in front of her, who was still dressed in luxurious clothes and had a dignified appearance. But he couldn't help revealing a trace of exhaustion, and she felt emotional in her heart. With over 1,000 years of history, the Kamla Empire that had always been considered the strongest country in the signs had actually fallen into this kind of situation in just a short year. It really made people feel that the matters of the world were impermanent. This Kamla Emperor in front of her, when Freya saw him last time, he was still very arrogant. But now he had gone from an emperor who controlled the lives of hundreds of millions to an exiled emperor. Thinking about it, it really was funny. The Kamla Empire's attitude towards the new flyer had always been lukewarm. They always had their own thoughts when cooperating with the new flyer, making the new flyer's projects in the Kamla Empire never go smoothly. So the relationship between the two sides wasn't close enough. After Freya took over the new flyer, because she received many reports of the Kamla Empire not cooperating, she was very dissatisfied with the Kamla Empire. She even had the thought of cutting off all cooperation with the Kamla Empire. But now, the Kamla Empire had become like this. This Kamla Emperor in front of her didn't go anywhere when he was escaping. Rather, he ran to the Principality of Constantine, running to the New Flight Commerce main base. Moreover, when he opened his mouth, he actually wanted the new flyer to help him. Chairman Freya, if your new flyer is willing to help the Kamla Empire recover their lost land after restoring your country, I will definitely give your new flyer the best treatment in the Kamla Empire. I will guarantee that your new flyer will obtain benefits that you will definitely be satisfied with. At this time, the Kamla Emperor knew that everything else was fake. The only thing that could move the new flyer was benefits. Freya shook her head and said, "Your Majesty, even after the Malar Empire takes over everything, our company can still cooperate with the Malar Empire and obtain enough benefits. Why will we take such a large risk to help you restore your country?" The Kamla Emperor's expression changed slightly. If someone dared to speak to him in such a taunting tone before, even if it was the new flyer's chairman, he wouldn't be polite. But now, he could only endure it and maintain a smile. "Chairman Freya, I think that you should understand that if the Malar Empire takes over our Kamla Empire and stabilizes the situation, the Malar Empire will become the strongest country on the signs. There won't be any country or power that can threaten them, not even your new flyer. When that time comes, do you think your new flyer can cooperate with the Malar Empire and obtain what conditions? Perhaps the Malar Empire can take a step further and directly attack the Principality of Constantine, right? Is that a threat?" Freya just smiled. Freya revealed a smile. "Your Majesty, I think that you still don't understand your position. Actually, you don't have the ability to discuss conditions right now. The power you still have isn't worth mentioning, right?" This time, the Kamla Emperor's expression really changed. Freya's words had hit his sore spot. Half a year ago, he thought that with the hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the Kamla Empire under his control, even if there were small disturbances in the country, it wasn't worth mentioning and could be taken care of in a bit of time. But he never thought that in just half a year, everything he controlled would become an illusion. Even the 50,000 royal guards that were the most loyal had almost been wiped out in the final battle with the Malar Empire. When he boarded the magic airship and left Wimbledon City, it meant that he had given up the final bit of power he had. The current him, other than the title of the Kamla Emperor, the 200 personal guards, and some loyal ministers who couldn't play any role, he really didn't have anything else. Compared to this, although Freya in front of him was only the chairman of a company in name, no one knew how many guards a new flyer had, no one knew how much military magic machine technology the new flyer had, and no one knew how strong the new flyer was. So the power the two of them had was like heaven and earth. What qualification did he have to talk about conditions in front of Freya? After thinking this through, the Kamla Emperor put down his pride as the emperor of the Kamla Empire. After being silent for a bit, he said in a deep voice, Chairman Freya, since you've chosen to meet me, doesn't that mean that I'm still worthy of your attention? So I feel that there's a possibility of us working together. Tell me, what conditions do I need for you to help me? Freya revealed a faint smile and spread her hands, gesturing for the Camlet Emperor to look around. Your Majesty, how much do you know about the Principality of Constantine? The Camlet Emperor was surprised. When people talked about the Principality of Constantine, their first thought was the New Flyer. They didn't care about the Principality of Constantine at all. So when they talked about the Principality of Constantine, other than the New Flyer, they didn't think of anything else. Although he was the Camlet Emperor and his knowledge wasn't something normal people could compare to. Now that Freya suddenly asked this, he didn't know how to respond. You mean, I'm talking about the political model of the Principality of Constantine. Does your Majesty understand this? The Camlet Emperor thought about it before narrowing his eyes and guessing Freya's thoughts. The National Parliament. Chapter 1253. The early summer sun shone down, raising the temperature of the streets. Walking on the streets would make one feel hot and dry. However, Cooler didn't seem to care about the heat at all as he strode forward. Instead, he unbuttoned his shirt and exposed his sturdy chest, putting on a bold and magnanimous demeanor. Coupled with the undisguised smile on his face, it made him seem even more high-spirited. It could even be said that he was complacent. Of course, he had a reason to put on such an appearance. At this time last year, he would only be an ordinary worker in an ordinary factory in a small town 300 kilometers away. However, ever since the news of the workers' rioting in the southern province spread, he took the opportunity to lead a group of familiar workers to start a riot as well. His status then rose accordingly. Now, he had become the leader of the largest worker organization in the former Camlet Empire's Lamass province. He commanded no less than 30,000 armed rioters and could be said to be the leader of the largest faction in the Lamass province. After the Camlet Empire was destroyed, there was no one in the Lamass province who could pose a threat to him. Even the Imperial Army, led by the governor's office in the Lamass province, had defected to his side and became one of his aides. Currently, within the Lamass province, not only did most of the commoners support him, even the nobles could only look up to him. Every time he thought about how those noble lords who used to be high and mighty could only bow and scrape before him with smiles on their faces, Claverai felt his mood improve. This kind of life was something that he had never imagined before. Look, even a large merchant guild like the New Flyer could only send someone to invite him and express their desire to discuss cooperation with him. With such an attitude, it meant that the New Flyer also acknowledged his influence in the Lamass province. It was enough to prove his current position in the Lamass province. Chairman Cooler, please come in. When he arrived in front of the New Flyer's branch in the Lamass province's governor's office, a New Flyer worker immediately welcomed him. Hearing how the Frestac Chamber of Commerce staff member addressed him, Claverai revealed a satisfied smile and followed him in. The so-called Chairman Claverai was actually after he led the workers to riot. In order to make it easier for him to lead the rioting workers, he didn't want to be called a count or a marquis like the nobles of the Kandra Empire. So he called himself the chairman of the Lamass Province Workers' Union. The others called him chairman. He had been invited by the Frestac Chamber of Commerce to discuss cooperation today. Now that the Frestac Chamber of Commerce's staff member had called him this, it meant that the Frestac Chamber of Commerce had recognized his position. This discussion was very sincere. As expected, when he entered the store, he saw a middle-aged man with a medium build and gentle appearance. Clavery recognized him at a glance. This middle-aged man was the New Flyer's supervisor in the Camlet Empire's Lamass province, Motower Shaw Boyle. Supervisor Shaw Boyle. Chairman Cooler, we are honored by your presence. Welcome. Supervisor Shaw Boyle laughed and took the initiative to extend his hand. Cooler reached out and shook hands with him, his heart filled with emotion. Although Supervisor Shaw Boyle in front of him was only a supervisor of a branch in the Lamass province, he was actually one of the top figures in the Lamass province. Before this, those who could meet with him and even talk to him were all important figures in the Lamass province. But now, he personally stood up to greet him. In the past, This was simply unimaginable. Supervisor Shaw Boyle, this isn't the first time we've met. It's just that I recognized you before, but you didn't necessarily recognize me. Hearing Cooler's words, Supervisor Shaw Boyle was a little surprised. Oh, I don't know where we've met before, but I didn't recognize you, Chairman Cooler. Cooler laughed. At that time, I was just an ordinary worker in the factory. I just happened to run into you, Supervisor Shaw Boyle, when you came to visit our factory, and I was fortunate enough to meet you. At that time, of course, I recognized you, but you didn't recognize me. Supervisor Shaw Boyle came to a sudden realization and laughed. That's all in the past. Now, who in the Lamass province doesn't recognize you, Chairman Cooler? Cooler nodded very complacently and reservedly. Without waiting for Supervisor Shaw Boyle to take care of him, he found a seat and sat down, then patted the table in front of him. Supervisor Shaw Boyle, I wonder what you've invited me to discuss this time. Supervisor Shaw Boyle smiled and didn't answer. His gaze turned to the few subordinates behind Cooler. How could Cooler not understand his meaning? He lightly snorted and said, "These are my most trusted companions. If there's anything, you can say in front of them." Supervisor Shaw Boyle smiled faintly and didn't insist. He chose the seat opposite Cooler and sat down. After a moment of silence, Supervisor Shaw Boyle asked, "Chairman Cooler, I wonder if you have any plans for the future of the Lamass province?" Cooler narrowed his eyes and asked back, "Supervisor Shaw Boyle, what do you mean by that? I'm sure you're well aware that the Lamass province can't remain in this state forever. It will eventually return to normal. Then, Chairman Cooler, as the chairman of the Workers' Union, don't you have any ideas?" Cooler's heart moved. He looked at Supervisor Shaw Boyle and said tentatively, "If the new flyer is willing to assist our union in restoring order in the province, we will certainly repay this in the future." Supervisor Shaw Boyle shook his head. Chairman Cooler, restoring order in the province isn't difficult. The difficult part is how to maintain it. To put it bluntly, have you thought about how to manage the entire Lamass province? Cooler was stunned. Although he had thought about this question many times, he was still just an ordinary worker. He didn't have any knowledge in this area. Even if someone had pointed it out to him, he was completely clueless. Now that he was asked by Supervisor Shaw Boyle, he thought about it, but could only answer according to the answer that someone had pointed out to him before. First, we need to rebuild the law. Then, we need to restore communications, transportation, electricity, and other basic facilities. As long as we can satisfy the basic needs of the majority, it's actually very easy to manage. Supervisor Shaw Boyle sighed. Chairman Cooler, it seems that you haven't seriously thought about this problem. Since that's the case, we have nothing to talk about this time. When you have thought it through, we can continue this topic. The faces of Cleverly and his subordinates behind him all changed. What do you mean by this? Cooler sternly asked. Supervisor Shaw Boyle, could it be that you specially invited me here just to make fun of me? No, I definitely didn't mean that. Supervisor Shaw Boyle shook his head. I very seriously wanted to invite you here to discuss the future arrangements of the Lamass province. But Chairman Cooler, you clearly aren't prepared. There's no meaning in continuing our conversation today. So let's end it here. Cooler could be said to be awe-inspiring in the Lamass province in the past year. Everyone had to be a bit apprehensive when seeing him. Even those high and mighty nobles had to lower their heads in front of him. Now that Supervisor Shaw Boyle had unceremoniously ordered him to leave, he suddenly felt a bit suffocated in his chest. What? Supervisor Shaw Boyle, what do you think I'm not prepared for? Cooler's tone couldn't help but carry a bit of gloominess. Or do I have to follow the arrangements of your new flyer? Supervisor Shaw Boyle turned a blind eye to the ominous glint in the eyes of Cooler and his subordinates behind him. He still maintained a smile and nodded. Yes. Our new flyer already has a detailed plan for the future of the Lamass province. I hope that Chairman Cooler can think about it carefully and work hard to cooperate with our work. Oh, Cooler dragged out his voice. Dare I ask Supervisor Shaw Boyle, how many guards did your new flyer invest in the Lamass province for you to dare say such words? Supervisor Shaw Boyle smiled faintly and took a sip of his tea, but he didn't answer. Cooler flew into a rage and slammed the table with force. He stood up abruptly and glared at Supervisor Shawboyle. His mouth trembled, but he only snorted heavily and turned around to leave. Several of his subordinates hurriedly followed him out. One of them moved closer to Cooler and asked doubtfully, "Boss, this guy dares to speak like that. Why didn't you order us to chop him up?" "Idiot." Cooler glared at him fiercely. "Do you know what kind of person he is? Chop him up? Do you believe that the new flyer can flatten the entire Lamass province in minutes?" Several of his subordinates looked at each other and were speechless. The reputation of the new flyer didn't just rely on them sweeping the signs with all kinds of magic machines. What truly made everyone wary of it was its previous glorious battle record. The past 30 years of history had already proved that once the new flyer supported a country, that country would inevitably become incomparably powerful. Even the two great empires couldn't avoid this. In front of such terrifying strength, no matter how arrogant Cooler was, he couldn't possibly think that he could resist the new flyer with only a few tens of thousands of workers and less than 10,000 soldiers of the former Kanla Empire under his command. But when Cooler tried to calm himself down, a trace of joy appeared in his heart. No matter what, the new flyer had specially invited him over to discuss the future arrangements of the Lamass province. This proved that they at least acknowledged his current position in the Lamass province. This would be a decisive help for him to truly control the entire Lamass province in the future. If he really obtained the support of the new flyer, becoming the new governor of the Lamass province would no longer be a fantasy. Thinking of this, Cooler took a deep breath and once again put on a confident appearance and strode forward. What was the name of the bookworm who gave him pointers before? It was time to find him again and ask him what he should do in the future. What Cleavery didn't know was that in the Frestac Chamber of Commerce's branch, manager Shaubiue had already taken out a small book. He drew a line under Cleavery's name before giving orders to his subordinates. "Go and contact the next one." Chapter 1254. 400 kilometers to the south of Lammas province was another province of the Kanla Empire, Merinda province. Similar to Lammas province, Merinda province also declared independence from the central government of the Kanla Empire a long time ago. But what was different from the Lamass province was that the Merinda province wasn't forced out of control because of the workers' riots. Rather, the Merinda province's governor's manor announced that they wouldn't listen to the Kandra Empire's parliament. Although they did not officially declare independence, it was more or less the same thing. Now that the capital of the Kanla Empire, Wimbledon City, had fallen into the hands of the Malar Empire, and the Kanla Empire could almost be declared dead, Merinda province did not join the Malar Empire like the other provinces in the north. Instead, it declared autonomy. Among the original 37 provinces of the Kanla Empire, Merinda province's performance was seen as very loyal to the imperial family. But the governor of Merinda province did not say much, and no one knew the true intentions of the former governor, Duke Wellin. After Wimbledon City fell and Merinda province declared autonomy, the governor of Merinda province had been working hard to stabilize the internal situation of Merinda province and did not have much contact with the outside world. Under Duke Wellin's efforts, Merinda province had been relatively stable and could be considered a relatively peaceful land within the Kanla Empire. On this day, the governor's mansion of Merinda province welcomed a guest. "Prime Minister, I am very happy to see you again." Duke Wellin opened his arms and hugged the guest warmly. He was full of smiles, showing that he was really happy for the guest's arrival. The Prime Minister of the Kanla Empire, Grand Duke Rostov, hugged Count Wellin tightly and also showed a gratified smile. "I'm also very happy to see you, Duke Wellin." After letting go of his hand, Grand Duke Rostov looked at Duke Welland from head to toe and sighed. "Duke Welland, it must have been hard on you to maintain the stability of Melinda province." Duke Welland smiled. "As the lord of this place, it's my duty." Hearing the title lord, Grand Duke Rostov raised his eyebrows, then calmed down and smiled. "To be able to do this at such a time, His Majesty's praise of you is not in vain." Duke Wellin is one of the few trustworthy loyal officials in the empire. His Majesty? Duke Welland's expression changed. He smiled, but did not continue the topic. He turned his head and looked at the other middle-aged man beside Grand Duke Rostov. President Montier, the cooperation you discussed the day before yesterday, is it related to the Prime Minister? That's right. The Frestec Chamber of Commerce's Merinda branch chairman, Rhys Montier, nodded with a faint smile. Today, I came with the Prime Minister in the hope of discussing a new cooperation project with you, Governor. I wonder if Lord Governor is interested? Duke Welland looked at Grand Duke Rostov, then looked at President Montier. He smiled and shook his head. If I say I am not interested, how will you two react? Of course, this was just a joke. After saying this, Duke Welland invited the two into the room and sat down. Prime Minister, I heard that after His Majesty left Wimbledon City, he went to the Principality of Constantine. I didn't believe it at that time, but now it seems that it is true. After taking a sip of tea, Duke Welland was the first to speak. Yes, His Majesty went to the Principality of Constantine to seek help from the new flyer. Grand Duke Rostov did not mince his words. Now, His Majesty has already reached a preliminary cooperation agreement with Freya. This time, President Montier and I have come together to discuss with you how to cooperate in the Merinda province. Cooperation? Duke Welland turned to look at President Montier. President Montier, the new flyer has been cooperating with the governor's manor to stabilize the situation in the province. I am very grateful. But this cooperation, President Montier revealed a smile and took out a thick document from his bag, handing it to Duke Welland. Sir Duke, this is the proposal for this cooperation. Please take a look. Duke Welland nodded. This was the new flyer style, and it made him believe that this cooperation was agreed to by the new flyer after consideration. It wasn't a private discussion between Grand Duke Rostov and President Montier. Looking over the proposal, Duke Welland was shocked by the first two sentences of the proposal. Getting rid of the Empire system and changing it to the Kandra Federation? Duke Welland looked up at Grand Duke Rostov and Chairman Montier in surprise. What does this mean? President Montier looked at Grand Duke Rostov. Grand Duke Rostov gave a soft cough and explained, this so-called Kandra Federation is actually to let the provinces of the Empire work together to form a new country. It will have the unity and strength of the Empire, but it will also allow the provinces to have a high degree of autonomy, allowing the provinces to have their own power. With Grand Duke Rostov's detailed explanation, Duke Welland finally understood what this so-called Kandra Federation was. This means His Majesty isn't planning on restoring the glory of the Empire and becoming the supreme emperor again? Grand Duke Rostov gave a bitter laugh. Duke Welland, do you think there's hope now? Duke Welland was silent for a bit before shaking his head. Impossible. That is. Grand Duke Rostov sighed. If it were possible, of course His Majesty would like to restore the glory of the Empire, but after all, His Majesty is wise and far-sighted. He can clearly see the present reality and knows that this idea is impossible. So he can take a step back and hope that the Empire can remain intact. Duke Welland was silent for a bit before giving a deep sigh and shaking his head. He didn't say anything else as he continued reading the plan in his hands. After a while, he suddenly knit his brows and looked up to ask, this Kandra Federation needs a president? After all, it is a country in name, so it needs a leader to represent the will of the entire Federation. Grand Duke Rostov explained with a faint smile. That means His Majesty is interested in this position? Duke Welland asked. No. After His Majesty has experienced the recent matters, he already has thoughts of retreating and isn't willing to participate in these matters. The one who is interested in this position is His Highness Prince Frank. Prince Frank? Duke Welland nodded, showing that he understood. If it was said that the Emperor didn't care about losing face, running to the new flyer to restore the foundation of the Kamla Empire, but he didn't care about the Kandra Federation at all, Duke Welland definitely wouldn't believe it. Now that His Majesty had chosen to retreat behind the scenes and let His Highness Prince Frank walk to the front, this was a very wise choice that could gain the recognition of more people. After reading the plan for a bit, Duke Wellin was silent for a bit before saying to Chairman Montier in a deep voice, "Chairman Montier, I can see Chairman Su's shadow in this plan." Chairman Montier laughed. "That's right. When we were discussing this plan, we asked Sir Chairman for many opinions." "Then what is Chairman Su's final opinion on this plan?" Sir Chairman's original words were, "I only propose this method, and whether the people of the Kamla Empire are willing to accept it or not, that's their problem." Chairman Montier imitated Su Yi's tone. "That means that Chairman Su didn't express his opinion?" "President, if you didn't support this model, you wouldn't have given so many detailed suggestions, right?" President Montier said. Chairman Montier said, "Sir Chairman hasn't cared about signs for many years. Only this time he cared. He even had many video conferences with the high-level members of the company and gave his opinion. It's like this." Duke Wellin nodded. After thinking for a bit, he turned to Duke Rostov and said, "I have a general idea of why you're here. But, Sir Prime Minister, I can't give you an answer right now because I can't see the possibility of this plan succeeding. Even with the help of the new flyer, you still think it's impossible?" Duke Rostov said in a surprised voice, "If the new flyer is willing to help, then it's very possible, but right now." Duke Wellin looked at Chairman Montier and shook his head. "I can't see the sincerity of the new flyer right now." Duke Rostov knit his brows. When he wanted to say something, Chairman Montier was already a step ahead. He gave a laugh and said, "Sir Governor is right. We businessmen always follow the principle of giving money and giving goods. Right now, we haven't shown enough valuable things to prove it, so naturally we can't expect the governor to believe us so easily. Sir Prime Minister, am I right?" Duke Rostov frowned and looked at Chairman Montier. He thought for a bit and nodded slightly. Chairman Montier continued, "But I asked the Lord Governor to be assured our Frestec Chamber of Commerce won't do meaningless things. Since we're here to invite you to work together, of course we won't save for nothing. Next, we'll take some corresponding actions. I believe that after you see it, you'll believe in our sincerity." Duke Wellin nodded without hesitation. "I'm looking forward to it." Chairman Montier and Duke Rostov exchanged a look, stood up together, and left. Chapter 1255. Similar things that happened in the Lamask and Merinda provinces continued to happen in various provinces of the Kamla Empire. Some things went smoothly, while others did not. But regardless of whether it went smoothly or not, the situation was gradually changing. The Malar Empire that had occupied Wimbledon City for a few months naturally sensed these subtle changes. If it was only the local forces that originally belonged to the Kamla Empire that made a move, then the Malar Empire would not be worried at all. But now that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce was involved, even if they had defeated the Kandra Empire, the Marlow Empire that ruled the Signs continent couldn't help being a bit vigilant. However, the first to make a move was not the new flyer, but the Lampari Kingdom. The winter of 3830 of the continental calendar had just passed, and the Lampari Kingdom brazenly sent troops into the Kamal province that bordered the Kamla Empire and the Lampari Kingdom. The Lampari Kingdom announced that it was to protect the people of the Lampari Kingdom who were in the Kamla Empire. However, after entering the Kamal province, the Lampari Kingdom's troops immediately clashed with the local forces of the Kamal province and the Malar Empire's troops stationed in the Kamal province. The Lampari Kingdom was clearly well prepared and sent out elite troops. The Malar Empire was not prepared at all and was defeated in an instant. More than 500 square kilometers of land in the western part of the Kamal province fell into the control of the Lampari Kingdom in just a week. This included the most important magic industrial city in the Kamal province. The Malar Empire quickly responded to this. Half a month later, the Malar Empire announced to the public that the Lampari Kingdom's troops were to immediately withdraw from the Kamal province. Otherwise, they would have to bear the consequences. This attitude was undoubtedly very tough. However, with the momentum of the Malar Empire defeating the Kamla Empire, it was natural for them to adopt such an attitude. However, to everyone's surprise, the Lampari Kingdom's response was just as tough. The Lampari Kingdom claimed that Kamal province was not part of the Malar Empire's territory, and the Malar Empire had no right to ask the Lampari Kingdom's army to withdraw. Neither side was willing to back down, so a war was about to break out. In the 4th month of year 3830 of the continental calendar, the Lampari Kingdom sent in 2 legions, totaling 60,000 soldiers, to the central plains of the Camel Province and the Malar Empire, totaling 110,000 soldiers, to battle. The result of the battle was beyond everyone's expectations. The Marlow Empire's side suffered a large defeat. Of the 110,000 people, over 20,000 had died, and the remaining 80,000 people had been defeated, losing over 10,000 people. They had lost over 30,000 soldiers in a single breath. On the other hand, the Lampari Kingdom's side only lost several thousand people. Winning with fewer people and such a large difference in casualties, this kind of battle record shocked everyone. When analyzing the battle, people found that the Lampari Kingdom could have such a glorious battle record. Other than being prepared, the most important reason was that the Lampari Kingdom's military magic machines were more advanced than the Malar Empire's. For example, the magic cannons that had a large amount of equipment and had an important position in their armies were the magic cannons. The Malar Empire's 3 legions were equipped with 4,600 cannons, and the Lampari Kingdom's 2 legions were equipped with 3,200 cannons. At first glance, the Lampari Kingdom's magic cannons were far less than the Malar Empire's, so their firepower was inferior. However, the actual situation was that of the 4,600 magic cannons of the Malar Empire's army. Only 800 of them were the 90mm high-energy magic cannons developed by the Malar Empire. The other 3,800 were all lower-caliber magic cannons. Of the 3,200 magic cannons on the Lampari Kingdom's side, there were a total of 1,200 magic cannons that were over 100mm caliber. There were even 300 magic cannons that the Lampari Kingdom revealed for the first time that were over 200mm caliber. Of the remaining 1,000 small-caliber magic cannons, more than half of them were multiple-barreled magic cannons of the same level. Comparing it like this, even if the Lampari Kingdom side had 1,000 fewer magic cannons, their firepower far surpassed that of the Malar Empire's army. So on the battlefield, the Malar Empire's army was in a passive situation from the beginning. At the same time, in the more and more important magic tanks, the Lampari Kingdom's side had the absolute advantage. The Lampari Kingdom only had 2 regiments, but they were equipped with 500 magic tanks. Compared to the 300 magic tanks of the Malar Empire's 3 regiments, the Lampari Kingdom not only had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they also had the advantage in terms of armor thickness, firepower, and even movement speed. Like this, on the ground, the Malar Empire was not only passively beaten, they couldn't even resist the attacks of the Lampari Kingdom at all. Of course, after experiencing the baptism of the military magic machines, the battles on the signs were no longer limited to the ground. In the air, there was also an important battle between both sides that was becoming more and more important. The concept of air supremacy was proposed by the new flyer over 20 years ago, and it was more and more important to the various countries. In the war between the Malar Empire and the Kamla Empire, the Malar Empire had relied on their absolute advantage in the air to beat the Kamla Empire until they couldn't fight back and died in the end. But now, in this battle, the Lampari Kingdom's air supremacy was a level higher than the Malar Empire's. In this battle, the Lampari Kingdom had sent in 3 magic battle airships at once. They had a total of 300 magic battle airships that could surpass 300 kilometers an hour, completely crushing the Malar Empire's magic battle airships. Compared to this, the Lampari Kingdom's magic battle airships were faster and more flexible. They were also equipped with large caliber magic bursts, small magic cannons, and 5 magic missiles. They surpassed the Malar Empire's magic battle airships in every aspect, so naturally they easily took control of the air. The Lampari Kingdom's army had both the land and the air, so it was natural for the Malar Empire's army to retreat. After analyzing the results of this battle, people found that even if the Malar Empire had defeated the Kamla Empire, making this giant empire that had existed for over 1,000 years declare its end. They still couldn't become the ruler of the continent. Now that the Lampari kingdom had jumped out, there was an even stronger opponent for the Malar Empire. The situation on the signs became even more confusing because of this. After this victory, the Lampari kingdom's army continued forward, defeating the Malar Empire's army in the Kamal province, as well as the local resistance forces. In just a month and a half, they controlled the entire Kamal province. However, at this time, there was a change that surprised everyone. The Kamal province was under the control of the Lampari kingdom. The previous governor of the Kamal province, Duke Nupara, suddenly held a press conference. In front of all the newspapers and several dozen magic illusion programs, he announced that the Kamal province would be renamed the Kamal Autonomous Region. Then there would be a public election to form the Kamal National Assembly. Then the assembly would elect the governing body of the Kamal province, which would be called the Kamal Autonomous Region Government. The most important thing was to elect a lord of the Kamal Autonomous Region, who would lead the entire government. If it was in the past, the lord of the Kamal Autonomous Region would be no different from the governor of the Kamal province. However, Duke Nupara's announcement clearly stated that the lord of the Kamal Autonomous Region would be subject to the supervision and restriction of the Kamal National Assembly. Any orders would have to be approved by the National Assembly before they could be executed. This was equivalent to tying a shackle on the hands of the lord, completely different from the previous governor who could control everything with one hand. What was even more shocking was that Duke Nupara didn't become the lord of the Kamal Autonomous Region. Instead, he had to accept an election and the final result would decide. This was the first time this had happened in the history of the Signs continent. Countless people were skeptical about this. What was the Camel province trying to do? What was even more strange was why the Lampari kingdom allowed the Kamal province to do this. However, amidst the doubts of the people, the Kamal province, the Kamal Autonomous Region's government was quickly and effectively implemented. It only took 3 months for the first National Assembly to be formed. Then, the representatives of the government were elected. As expected, Duke Nupara was elected as the first overlord of the Kamal Autonomous Region. While countless people were shocked and confused by the Kamal province's magnificent transformation, the other provinces of the Kamla Empire also underwent the same shocking changes one after another. First, the 3 southern provinces announced that they would be converted into autonomous regions, just like the Kamal province. They would undergo a government reorganization and elections. Following that, 2 other provinces that were deeply affected by the workers' rebellion made similar moves. However, there were some differences between them. The first 3 provinces underwent the same changes as the Kamal province, but the latter 2 provinces were slightly different. Because they were deeply affected by the workers' rebellion, the 2 provinces had long lost the governor-general's authority that they had when they were under the Kamla Empire. Therefore, they could only undergo a complete reorganization. Compared to the Kamal province and the other 3 provinces, these 2 provinces were the least affected by the old nobles. The majority of the National Assembly formed were civilians. However, this didn't have much to do with the people in the signs. Most people were more concerned about the outcome of the battle between the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire. Chapter 1256. General Dadanir was standing on a rock at the top of the mountain, holding a telescope in his hand. He looked at the Lampari Kingdom's camp at the foot of the mountain with a serious expression. The Lampari Kingdom's army had been at the foot of the mountain for 2 days, but there was no movement at all. It really was a bit strange. But General Dadanir didn't dare let down his guard. After all, he was leading his army to guard the most important pass to the Kamla Empire's northern province. Once it was lost, the Malar Empire's control in the northern Kamla Empire would be completely exposed to the Lampari Kingdom's army. With the current strength of the 2 armies, if they couldn't stop the Lampari Kingdom's army at this easy-to-defend and hard-to-attack pass, letting them enter the northern plains of the Kamla Empire, it meant that the Malar Empire would lose all the territory they worked so hard to control. However, could they defend it? General Dadanir looked up at the sky and revealed a bitter smile. The Lampari Kingdom's military magic airships were much better than the Malar Empire's in all aspects. When the two armies clashed, it was the Lampari Kingdom that had control of the air, and the Malar Empire could only be suppressed. In order to take back control of the air, it's said that the Empire had already begun discussing the Magician Legion system. They would bring back the powerful magicians that had accumulated over the years and rely on them to deal with the Lampari Kingdom's magic airship fleet. On the surface, this suggestion wasn't unreasonable. Although the magic airships were strong, because they were too big, they couldn't compare in terms of agility. If they used powerful magicians to deal with them, with the magicians' deep understanding of magic space, it wouldn't be like when they first met the new Flyers' magic airships. They couldn't fight back because of the simplest magic elemental space lock, so there was hope to fight back. But in reality, the feasibility of this suggestion was very low. First, because they were limited by the Magicians' Peace Treaty of the continent. The magicians of the Malar Empire weren't willing to break the treaty and join the Malar Empire's army. This was because it was very likely that they would lose all chances of getting a skill evaluation in the future, as well as losing the chance to work in other companies or research facilities. It really was the duty of the Malar Empire's magicians to work for their country, but there was no one who was willing to sacrifice their future for this. Second, even if the magicians were willing, the Malar Empire wouldn't be willing. Recruiting magicians into the army and fighting the Lampuri Kingdom was clearly going against the Magicians' Peace Treaty of the continent. The Marlow Empire would be criticized by all the countries of the Signs continent. This was of the Malar's army's current situation. Unless they had no other choice, the Malar Empire wasn't willing to do something like this that would cause endless trouble. Then again, even if they really did this, they would only be able to take back a part of the air. It would be very hard to suppress the Lampari Kingdom's magic airship fleet. As for using this to gain an advantage and defeat the Lampari Kingdom, it was basically impossible. Otherwise, the Malar Empire would insist on doing this even if they would be criticized by the other countries. They had already taken care of the Kanla Empire, and if they defeated the Lampari Kingdom, the Malar Empire would become the strongest country in the Signs. At that time, this treaty wouldn't be a problem at all. But because they didn't have this confidence, the Malar Empire couldn't make this decision. In the sky in the distance, there were several black dots that quickly flew over. General Dadanir didn't need to look carefully to know that it should be the Lampari Kingdom's transport magic airships that were transporting supplies over. In the past 2 days, he had seen this situation 4 times. It could be seen how frequently the Lampari Kingdom transported supplies. But after seeing this situation, the doubts in General Dadanir's heart became even deeper. Since the Lampari Kingdom was willing to use the transport magic airships to transport supplies, it meant that their desire to attack was very strong. But they had been waiting at the foot of the mountain for 2 days, and there was no movement, just what was going on. The situation on the battlefield was constantly changing, so naturally they had to race against time no matter what they did. Every bit of time was precious, but the Lampari Kingdom's army had wasted 2 days here. This was simply a major mistake. Unless they were planning something. Thinking of this, General Dadanir put down his binoculars in an annoyed manner. He took a large magic communicator from a guard beside him and made a call. "Hey, Hanich, how is it on your side?" "Nothing much." There was a calm and steady voice that came from the magic communicator. "What? Is there a situation on your side?" "It's better if there is a situation." General Dadanir groaned. General Dadanir gave a snort. "Those damn Lampuri people, they've been waiting at the foot of the mountain for 2 days, and they haven't done anything. Just what do they want to do? Perhaps they're just blocking you." Hanich on the other side of the magic communicator was the same as General Dadanir. They were both commanders of the Malar Empire's garrison. They were now in charge of an army, each guarding 2 places that belonged to the Kanla Empire. Because the 2 of them had a good relationship and they weren't far from each other, Dadanir would often contact Hanich. "What are they blocking me for? The Empire isn't prepared to counterattack, unless they want to attack us," General Dadanir muttered. But looking at their current appearance, it doesn't seem like it. It's very clear that New Flyer wants to cooperate with those fellows from the Kamla Empire to do something in the west and south. The Lampari Kingdom is cooperating with them. Hanich's voice was as calm as ever. I really don't know what New Flyer is doing. If they really want to take a piece of the Kandra Empire's territory from the Empire's mouth, they could just send their guards to steal it. Why would they need to do all these things in a roundabout way? It's simply too troublesome. General Didenier's voice was filled with disdain. Everyone says that New Flyer's chairman Su is the wisest person, but I think he's completely muddle-headed. If you don't understand anything, then just obediently shut up and watch. Hanich's tone finally changed a bit, but it was a reprimand for General Dadenier. Chairman Su, this kind of person, must have his reasons for doing things. It's just that he can't see it right now. General Dedenier helplessly sighed. Well, you're Su Yi's loyal supporter. I really shouldn't talk to you about this topic. Speaking of which, Hanich, if you weren't a person from the Malar Empire, I'm afraid you would have already joined the New Flyer, right? If you have enough understanding of Chairman Su, you will definitely have the same deep admiration for him as I do. Hanich's tone was very serious. But this doesn't mean that I will choose to join the New Flyer. And now isn't the time to discuss this with you. The Empire let us guard these two places in order to stabilize the area that originally belonged to the Kamla Empire in the north. After the Empire properly digested this area, I believe there will be further actions. As for now, let the Lampari Kingdom and the New Flyer mess around in the south. Of course I understand. It's just that it's really uncomfortable to be stuck in the mountain and not be able to go out. General Dadenier complained. If you think you can win, then I don't object to you bringing people to fight. Hanich said coldly. I'm not crazy. General Dadenier muttered and decisively hung up the communication. The communication with Hanich didn't have any real meaning. It was just to relieve the annoyance in General Dadenier's heart. He often did this kind of thing, and Hanich was already used to it, so they didn't talk too much in the communication. It was just a casual conversation. Seeing General Dedenier put down the magic communicator, a guard walked over and handed him a form. General, this is the latest combat readiness report we just received. General Dedenier frowned and finally sighed as he took the form. Although he was already mentally prepared, after seeing the situation on the form, General Dadenier still felt a headache. Compared to yesterday's report, the Army's combat situation was much worse. The form clearly showed that just yesterday, there were 2 magic cannons that had malfunctioned. One of them had lost its firing array and the other had a crack in the barrel, so it couldn't fire at all. At the same time, in the reserve of magic cannonballs, after a single day, there were 13 that had lost their effectiveness. Adding in the 37 magic repeating guns that had malfunctioned, the tracks in a magic tank had fallen off, and even over 100 eggs in the warehouse had disappeared for no reason. All kinds of bad situations accumulated, making General Dadenier annoyed. He couldn't help kicking a tree to the side. Damn, are those fellows from the logistics department eating shit? A small problem like the loss of over 100 eggs could be ignored, but there were all kinds of new equipment malfunctions that General Dadenier couldn't accept. His army's military magic machines were already at a disadvantage compared to the Lampari Kingdom. Now that there were all these non-combat losses, if this continued, there was no need for the Lampari Kingdom to attack. He himself wouldn't be able to hold on. Thinking of this, he couldn't help cursing those fellows from the Malar Empire's logistics department in his heart. Apart from the 5 Imperial Guard legions directly under the Imperial family, the logistics department would always shortchange and skimp on the armaments for the garrison legions that he commanded. Now, that his soldiers were equipped with military magic machines, not mentioning the lack of quantity, there were also problems with the quality. But he also knew that there were times when he couldn't blame the logistics department. Chapter 1257. For example, the 2 magic cannons that had problems were made by the Empire's 2nd magic cannon factory, which was no different from the magic cannons of the Royal Guard. But the quality of the military magic machines produced by the Army headquarters wasn't stable, being far from being able to compare to the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's magic cannons. There were all kinds of strange problems that the soldiers were already used to. Even compared to the military magic machines made by the Lampari Kingdom, it was clearly worse. When General Detanier's army fought the Lampari Kingdom's army before, they had wiped out a Lampari Kingdom scout team and obtained a batch of military magic machines from them. Just using the most common magic repeating gun as a comparison, the magic repeating gun of General Detanier's army could fire 18 shots at most, and the Lampari Kingdom's army could fire 24 shots. Although they only needed one magazine, there was a large difference in reloading speed, and there was a large difference in power. In order to wipe out the Lampari Kingdom scout team that only had 12 soldiers, General Detanir had lost 8 lives. It had to be known they had an absolute advantage in numbers of 5-1. Other than that, just by looking at it and touching it, one could clearly see that the Lampari Kingdom's magic repeating gun, whether it was in terms of craftsmanship or assembly, it was clearly more refined than the Malar Empire's. What shocked General Detanir even more was that the main body of the Lampuri Kingdom's magic repeating rifle was clearly made of special steel. It could keep the barrel at an acceptable temperature even after firing for a minute, allowing it to continue firing. If it was the Malar Empire's magic repeating gun, under this high frequency of continuous firing, there would be a slight deformation inside the gun barrel. It would greatly affect the accuracy and might even break the gun. Speaking of accuracy, General Detanir had personally experimented with it. He had used the Lampari Kingdom's magic repeating gun and his own army's magic repeating gun to shoot at a target at the same distance. The final results showed that the accuracy of the Lampari Kingdom's magic continuous shotgun was more stable than the Malar Empire's magic continuous shotgun by more than 20%. For a single military magic machine like this, the difference was already enormous. After personally verifying this point, General Dardanelle almost felt hopeless for a moment. Since when did the Lampari Kingdom's magic industry become so powerful? It actually surpassed the Malar Empire so obviously. As the commander of a legion on the front line, General Detanir had a much deeper understanding of the situation than the others. In the battle against the Lampari Kingdom, it was useless even if the Malar Empire had more people. Due to the obvious difference in the military magic machines between the two sides, General Dardanelle always felt that it was very difficult to fight. Therefore, when he saw the Lampari Kingdom's army at the foot of the mountain, he felt even more uneasy. With their strength, even if they directly attacked his position, there was a high chance that they would succeed. But now, they were only guarding the foot of the mountain. It was clear that they were preparing for a safer approach. Thinking of this, General Dardanelle frowned. He stuffed the combat situation report into the arms of his guard and walked into the simple barracks behind him. "General, what's the matter?" The strategists in the barracks saw General Detanir suddenly rush in, and they were all stunned. "Are there any new instructions from above?" General Dardanelle asked in a deep voice. The few staff officers looked at each other and shook their heads. General Dardanelle frowned even more. He grabbed the magic communication device on the table in the middle of the barracks and quickly connected to the military headquarters. After chatting for a while, General Dardanelle angrily slapped down and directly cut off the communication. The few staff officers next to him were shocked and looked at him with a stunned expression. General Dardanelle's face was gloomy as he paced back and forth in the barracks. He had just made a request to the military headquarters, hoping that they could send him a batch of supplies to help him defend his position. But the military headquarters said that the transportation was inconvenient and the Lampari Kingdom side didn't make any moves. And so on. Damn, these fellows were so nice when they wanted me to be at the front, but now they're giving me all kinds of excuses. General Dardanelle fiercely cursed. After thinking for a bit, he pressed the magic communication device again and planned to directly negotiate with the logistics department. But after slapping down, he found that there was no response from the magic communication device. General Dardanelle looked down and saw that there was no problem with the light on the magic communication device. Moreover, there was a sound coming from the magic communication device, but it couldn't be connected no matter what. What? This thing is also broken? General Dardanelle frowned and slapped the magic communication device. The few staff officers came over to take a look. They didn't know what was going on, so they could only send someone to call the person in charge of the military equipment maintenance. General Dardanelle waited for a while, and seeing that it still couldn't be done, he took out his personal magic communication device and planned to directly contact his acquaintances in the logistics department. But after he opened the communication request, he found that there was no response at all. What happened all of a sudden? General Dardanelle felt a bit strange. When he looked up to see the technical staff of the Legion coming over and was about to grab them for questioning, a group of people anxiously ran out from all directions of the camp. After asking, these fellows were actually the ones who were about to use the magic communication device, but they found that they couldn't be connected. General Dardanelle's face sunk. This strange situation gave him a bad feeling in his heart. At this time, there were several whistling sounds that came from the distance. General Dardanelle and the surrounding Legion soldiers' faces all changed. They all scattered and found cover to hide. Hong, 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 hong. Continuous sounds of explosions rang out, and the camp was immediately in a mess. Seeing that a guard was with him, General Dardanelle kicked his butt and angrily roared, "What are you hiding for? Why aren't you giving the order to open the shield?" The guard hurriedly responded, but before he could walk out, a pale green light had already risen from the position and turned into a semicircular cover, covering the position. The magic cannonballs that whistled through the air smashed into these light green covers, but they could only create ripples on the surface. They couldn't directly fall into the formation like before. General Dardanelle let out a sigh of relief and came out from his hiding place. When General Dardanelle received the mission of guarding the pass, the first thing he requested from a military was a complete set of the latest rock-level magic protection system. Although it was still far from the top-level Guardian Goddess level, a complete set of rock-level magic protection system developed by the Malar Empire was enough to block most of the known military magic machine attacks. Although the Lampari Kingdom's firepower was stronger than the Malar Empire's, as long as the system had enough magic stones, the camp was safe. General Dardanelle could prepare a large amount of high-concentration magic crystals to maintain the protection system for more than 10 hours. It was enough to withstand the continuous attacks of the Lampari Kingdom for 10 hours. But even if the Lampari Kingdom's military was better than the Malar Empire's, it was impossible to maintain such a high-intensity attack for 10 hours. So General Dardanelle believed that at least the camp would be fine in a short period of time. As for the longer period, it would depend on whether the military could resupply in time. All right, why are you all in a daze? Quickly go to your positions and prepare to counterattack. General Dardanelle roared and quickly gave the order. It was obviously not good to be passive. If they didn't counterattack and let the Lampari Kingdom attack, even with the protection system, it was impossible to guarantee their safety. However, just as General Dardanelle was ordering his deputies and staff officers to assign the mission, one of his subordinates who was in charge of checking the magic space raised his head with a horrified expression. General, detected, what is there? Say it. General Dardanelle fiercely stared at him. There is a super high energy reaction coming from the southwest. Super high energy reaction? General Dardanelle was shocked. How high? It is possible to exceed the limit of the shield. Exceed the limit of the shield? How is this possible? That's right, what a joke. How can there be such an exaggerated thing? It must be that your detection system is malfunctioning. The surrounding staff officers immediately reprimanded him. General Dardanelle frowned and waved his hand, carefully detected again. After confirming, halfway through his words, a flame suddenly fell. Boom! The flame exploded and instantly engulfed the entire command center. About 3 kilometers away from the Malar Empire's camp on the mountain, the Lampari Kingdom's Third Army, Count Lenk, put down the telescope in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. When he saw the Malar Empire's carefully arranged checkpoint, he decided that he couldn't use force. Now it seemed that the Malar Empire side was indeed well prepared. They actually arranged a magic protection system in such a large area. If he used in normal attack mode, even if he used up all the magic cannonballs in the army, he might not be able to take it down, and his own casualties would be very heavy. But now, he only used 3 shots of the Lampari Kingdom's Moose 1 medium to long-range magic missile to break the magic protection system in one fell swoop, exposing the entire camp to the gunfire. As long as he put in more effort, it wouldn't be a problem to take down this camp. Thinking of this, Count Lenk's expression changed. He took a step forward and loudly ordered the entire army through the magic communicator in his hand. Fire with all your might. Take it down before sunset. Boom, 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 boom. As if in response to Count Lenk's order, a series of explosions rang out and shook the entire mountain range. Chapter 1258. The battle between the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire had already lasted for 4 months, and the situation was completely out of people's expectations. Most people thought that even if the Lampari Kingdom's strength was in the top 3 of the signs, they were still a bit lacking compared to the 2 empires. Since the Malar Empire could defeat the Kamla Empire, how could they not take down the weaker Lampari Kingdom? However, the reality was that the Malar Empire and the Lampari Kingdom were losing. In just 4 months of fighting, they had already given up the Kamla Empire and the Lampari Kingdom's territory. If it wasn't for the Malar Empire transferring large amounts of troops from their country and using their absolute advantage in numbers to stop the Lampari Kingdom's attack, the Lampari Kingdom might have taken a step forward. In this battle, the Lampari Kingdom's army clearly showed that they were stronger than the Malar Empire's army. The main reason for this was naturally the military magic machines. The military magic machines that the Lampari Kingdom's army were equipped with in terms of quality, power, hit rate, failure rate. In other aspects, they were all much stronger than the military magic machines of the Malar Empire's army. This allowed the Lampari Kingdom's army to clearly show that they were stronger. Other than this, what shocked people the most was that when the Lampari Kingdom attacked an important pass that was guarded by the Malar Empire that led to the Kamla Empire's northern provinces, they used a new weapon, the long-range magic missile. This new military magic machine could attack from several hundred kilometers away and had a very exaggerated hit rate. It was also incomparably strong, making it impossible for people to defend against it. According to the battle report, the Malar Empire's garrison at the pass was equipped with the rock-grade magic defense system that the Malar Empire's army couldn't fully equip, but they couldn't block the long-range magic missile. The magic missile directly pierced through and destroyed the core of the rock-grade magic defense system, causing the entire defense system to be paralyzed. Then the entire position was exposed to the artillery fire of the Lampari Kingdom's army and fell. It was fine in other aspects, but this kind of long-range magic missile that could attack from several hundred kilometers away and accurately hit its target, it filled everyone with a deep fear. Think about it. Even if you were sitting at home, there would be a magic missile flying at you at high speed. You couldn't prevent it and couldn't dodge it at all, so you could only wait for death. How terrifying of a thing was this? Although the Lampuri Kingdom's side announced that the Lampuri Kingdom's long-range magic missiles were only preliminary results, and they didn't have that many magic missiles that could be used, so they wouldn't easily use them. How could anyone believe this? The Lampari Kingdom dared to use this thing in battle, and it had such good effects, it was clear that they had already researched it to a certain degree. How could it be like they said? It was only preliminary research. The Lampari Kingdom, saying that they didn't have that many long-range magic missiles, made it easier for people to believe. If they really had enough, the Lampari Kingdom would have already used the long-range magic missiles to flatten the Malar Empire's army, so they wouldn't need to use their army to fight them. Another point of view was that with how powerful the long-range magic missile was, it must be very expensive to make. Even if the Lampari Kingdom had enough long-range magic missiles, they wouldn't be willing to use them all. But no matter what, the Lampari Kingdom had used this battle to announce their long-range magic missiles, which made the other countries deeply vigilant. There were even many people who secretly equated the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire in their minds. The Lampari kingdom that displayed such a strong battle strength was enough to replace the Kanla Empire, becoming another empire on the signs. However, the good times didn't last. After the Lampari kingdom and the Malar Empire's armies had been in a stalemate in the Kanla Empire's northern province for 2 months, the Malar Empire suddenly announced that they had successfully developed the long-range magic missile and now had the technology to launch it. Everyone was stunned. The long-range magic missile sounded like a very high-level technology, but why did the Malar Empire only need 2 months to develop it? This was too ridiculous. But the Malar Empire had used 3 long-range magic missiles to destroy a position of the Lampari Kingdom's side in a battle with the Lampari Kingdom. They used facts to tell everyone that this wasn't fake at all. A month later, the Nozdorma Business Union Kingdom to the east had also fired several long-range magic missiles in a battle with the Alliance Army to the east. They destroyed the magic cannons in the back of the Alliance Army, obtaining a large victory while also announcing the success of developing the long-range magic missile technology. This time, everyone was confused. The long-range magic missile technology, was it really that easy to develop? If it really was like this, didn't that mean that in the future, there would be long-range magic missiles flying over the signs? The new issue of the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly had answered this question for everyone. In the article of the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly, it explained in detail that the long-range magic missile technology was based on the magic rockets that could send artificial health products into space. Thinking about it from another angle, the magic rockets could send artificial satellites high and far into space. If artificial health products were replaced by powerful magic bombs, wouldn't they also be able to send them far away? So as long as they did some research, the countries that could send artificial satellites could easily develop long-range magic missiles. This explanation made everyone come to a sudden realization. Indeed, it was like the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly said. If one looked at it purely from a technical point of view, this long-range magic missile was still lacking compared to the magic satellite launch vehicle. Since they could send artificial health products into space, it wasn't strange to make long-range magic missiles. The only technical problem was the guidance word on the magic missile. The reason why the long-range magic missile was called a magic missile and not a long-range magic rocket was because this thing could aim at a target from several hundred kilometers away and launch an attack on the target without any large deviation. This was something that the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly didn't explain, but it did give a hint. It said that this precise guidance technology was related to using magic signal waves to detect things. This principle was similar to how artificial satellites could detect things on the surface of the Earth from far away. Although it wasn't clear, for most of the countries in the signs, this was already enough. Very soon, after the Lampari Kingdom, the Malar Empire, and the Nozdorma Business Union Kingdom, there were several other countries that had a foundation in the magic machine industry that announced that they had developed long-range magic missiles. There were many people who were confused by this phenomenon. The Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly explained the long-range magic missile technology this clearly. It was like they were deliberately telling the countries in the signs to develop long-range magic missiles as soon as possible. But this thing was clearly developed by the Lampari Kingdom first, so it was the biggest advantage the Lampari Kingdom had over the other countries. Now that the new flyer was doing this, wasn't it destroying the Lampari Kingdom's advantage? Why did the new flyer do this? What benefits did it have? Don't worry about those idiots. Freya, are you prepared? The Kandra Federation's elections are about to begin. Are the men on your side ready? King Raymond asked Freya in a magical illusion. If you have time to worry about me, why don't you worry about the Malar Empire taking this chance to cause trouble? Freya rolled her eyes at King Raymond, thinking that this fellow wouldn't have spoken to her in such a questioning tone before. Was it because he had been a king for a long time that his attitude had gradually changed? No wonder her father and Aunt Agnes became like this. It seemed like the change in attitude brought by the change in status was very normal. You don't need to worry about the Malar Empire. King Raymond never thought that a single question from him would make Freya think this much, but he still said with a smile, I have already arranged an army in the north. It's enough to stop the Malar Empire's full attack. Moreover, if the Malar Empire really dares to do this, our allies in the north definitely won't let go of this good chance. Freya revealed a faint smile and said with a nod, the Malar Empire shouldn't be that stupid. So if nothing unexpected happens, the Kandra Federation's elections should go smoothly. At this point, Freya rolled her eyes and suddenly asked, Raymond, do you regret it? Regret? King Raymond was surprised. Regret what? Regret that when you agreed to create the Kandra Federation, you didn't convince me to swallow the Kamla Empire for your Lampari kingdom. King Raymond slightly knit his brows to think before shaking his head. I don't regret it. I'm very clear that our Lampari kingdom doesn't have the strength to swallow the entire Kamla Empire. If we do this, we will fall into chaos and we won't be able to develop as fast as we do now. Mother said that the creation of an empire requires patience and a large amount of time. I'm still young. I don't need to be this impatient. Seeing the sincere expression on King Raymond's face, Freya nodded with a smile. You make me think of a conversation I had with my father before. What did Uncle Sue say? I asked him before, since our new flyer is this strong, and even the two empires are afraid of us, why don't you want to be an emperor? What did he say? He said, his life is limited and time is precious. Creating a country and an empire requires too much time and energy, so he didn't want to waste it, so he wasn't willing. King Raymond was silent for a bit before saying with a soft sigh, Uncle Sue's realm really surpasses ours. He can actually treat the throne like dirt. I can't compare to him. Nonsense. There is no other man in this world that can compare to him. Freya gave a soft snort before revealing a smile. But looking at it from another angle, it has a different meaning. What? He is already old, but you and I are still young. So he doesn't have time, but you do and I do. Raymond's eyes lit up, but he didn't say anything and just revealed a faint smile. Chapter 1259. President, the spaceship has crossed the stratosphere. President, the spaceship has broken through the atmosphere and officially entered space. President, the spaceship has entered orbit and is synchronizing the orbit data. President, the spaceship has successfully docked with the space station and 3 astronauts have entered the space station. President, the spaceship wreckage has been successfully recovered, and the surface base station has sent a communication signal. Hearing the report from his subordinate, Sue-E nodded and picked up the special magic communicator in his hand that can use magic signal fluctuations to communicate directly in space. Hello, this is Sue. President, this is the Surface Base Station Command Center. We have contacted the 3 astronauts in the space station. According to their feedback, they have now taken off their spacesuits and lived normally in the space station for more than 24 hours. There are no abnormalities for the time being. Very good. What about the other experimental creatures? According to the report, except for a black rabbit that accidentally injured its foot while escaping, all the experimental creatures are in good condition. Did anything happen to the injured black rabbit? Not for the time being. Very good. Continue to observe and report the situation at any time. If there are any abnormalities, be sure to contact the Dragon Support Center in time. If there is a situation you can't deal with, you can ask them to help. Yes. After hanging up the communication with the Ground Base Station Command Center, Sue-E looked up at space and asked Lucian next to him, Are you ready? Although he has met Sue-E many times and worked together for a long time, every time he was alone with Sue-E, Lucian couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Hearing the question, Lucian nodded vigorously as if he was afraid that Sue-E couldn't see it. Sue-E smiled and didn't make any unnecessary movements. He just stared at Lucian and then activated the teleportation array. A moment later, their eyes lit up as they appeared in the moon base left behind by the abyssal demons on Alice. Compared to the first time Sue-E came here, this base had changed a lot. Other than all kinds of equipment, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had even built a small residential area for the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's researchers to live in. Including Akali, all the researchers of the moon base had been here for over a year. They would only return to the surface of the Signs planet for 2 days of vacation each month, and they would be on Alice the rest of the time, focusing on studying the transport array on Alice. Under such focused research, the research progress naturally increased greatly. 9 months ago, the magic signal transmitter that Sue had sent away through the teleportation array finally sent back a magic signal. This meant that not only did it remain intact after being teleported, but it also had the ability to send back magic signals. It also meant that the location it was teleported to was not particularly far away. According to New Flyer's latest research, although the transmission speed of magic signals could not be determined, it was obvious that it could not exceed the speed of light. And they only received the magic signal after 9 months, which meant that the magic signal transmitter was not more than a light year away from the Signs planet in Alice. After that, Akali led the research team to conduct deeper research on the transport array, successfully completing the first simulation of the transport array 6 months ago. This simulation of the transport array was built on the foundation of the ruins left by the demons of the abyss, completely replicated by the New Flyer. Of course, compared to the transport array left by the demons of the abyss, the transport array that Akali led the research team to design was a bit different. It combined the 10,000 years of research history of the transport array on Signs, as well as the data analysis and scientific research ideas that Sue brought. So compared to it, this transport array was more complete and controllable. The first experiment allowed the 2 black rabbits to be sent from Space Island to New Flyer's main base on the Demon Cloud continent. The second experiment allowed them to cross the 2 continents, directly sending Elder Lysania from the Demon Cloud continent to Signs. In the fourth experiment 4 months ago, they had completed the feat of teleporting from the Signs planet to Alice. And according to Suyi's request, Cassandra was leading her dragon brethren to another moon, Tetas, to create a transport array that allowed them to teleport seamlessly between the Signs planet and the 2 moons. The focus of his recent research was on the teleportation array on Ellie's body that sent away the magical signal emitter. Sue and Lucian came today to personally experience this experiment. When the 2 appeared on Alice, the ones who came up weren't the researchers of the New Flyer, but rather 2 elves. Chairman Sue, the Lady Elder, and Lady Akali are waiting for you, an elf said. Sue nodded and walked with Lucian to another transport array that was a bit further from the base's transport array. Akali, Elder Lysania, a group of New Flyer researchers, and a group of elves were all waiting here. Seeing Sue come over, the 2 greeted Sue before Akali clapped her hands and said, "Since Sir Chairman is already here, there's no need to wait. Let's begin the experiment." She turned to Elder Lysania after saying this. "Is your side ready?" Elder Lysania nodded. "No problem. We're ready at any time." Hearing Elder Lysania's words, the male and female elves from the Azhara tribe who were standing behind her walked out and entered the transport array. Sue knit his brows and wanted to say something to Elder Lysania, but Elder Lysania raised her hand to stop him. "There's no need to say anything, Chairman Sue. Searching for the ruins of our ancestors has been our tribe's long-cherished wish for tens of thousands of years. Now that we finally have this opportunity, we won't miss it." Sue could only bitterly smile and shake his head. Although the signal sent back by the magic signal transmitter indicated that the transport array should be safe, it was still a place full of unknown and unpredictable dangers. Therefore, Sue had always been willing to experiment on living people and opposed Elder Lysania and the elves taking the risk. However, Elder Lysania's attitude was firm, and the elves of the Azhara tribe regarded participating in this experiment as the greatest glory. Sue couldn't really stop them. In the end, he couldn't dissuade Elder Lysania and reluctantly agreed. Fortunately, they had already done several experiments before and had sent back some living creatures. Through the images sent back by the magic illusion camera, those creatures were alive and kicking without any problems, which proved that the transport array should be safe. "All right, Chairman. Actually, if it weren't for you stopping us, my subordinates, and I would also want to participate in this experiment ourselves. How could we let Elder Lysania's elves get ahead of us?" Akali complained on the side. It's scientific research. How can there be no sacrifice at all and just wait for the results to be reaped? Sue frowned and glared at her, only to find that the other researchers around Akali had the same look on their faces. He couldn't help but be surprised. Have these guys been brainwashed by Akali? Forget it. Let's start the experiment. Sue waved his hand and signaled for the experiment to begin. All the preparations had already been done before Sue came. Under Sue's order, the researchers of New Flyer immediately got into position and turned on all kinds of instruments, preparing to collect and monitor all the relevant data. If any accidents happened, they would be able to find out immediately and give a warning or correction. The elves of the Azhara tribe who came with Elder Lysania all stared at the male and female elves in the center of the transport array, with eyes full of excitement and envy. He couldn't understand this fanatical atmosphere and could only shake his head. He turned to Akali's side and looked at the data on the instrument with her. As Akali pressed the switch, the precisely controlled mana was transferred into the transport array through the magic crystal and immediately activated the transport array. The light blue light became more and more intense. There was no need to look at the data at all. Just by sensing the magic elements in the surrounding space, or even just by looking at the naked eye, Sue could see that the space enveloped by the transport array had begun to undergo drastic changes. Warning: the spatial dislocation rate has exceeded 50%. Warning: the spatial dislocation rate has exceeded 70%. Warning: space. Warning: the spatial dislocation rate has reached 99%. After reporting this, the researcher of New Flyer who was responsible for instilling mana into the transport array looked up at Akali. Akali turned to look at Sue. Sue glanced at Elder Akali and found that even she was looking at the transport array with a slightly excited expression. She didn't even look at him, so he sighed and nodded to Akali. Akali carefully checked the data collected by the transport array and made sure that it was in a stable state. Then, she calmly ordered, "Continue to inject mana and activate the transport array." The researcher in charge of the transport array took a deep breath and tried to calm his excited mood. If this experiment succeeded, it meant that they might really open up a whole new world. The significance was naturally extremely great. When he thought of the possibility of opening the door to a new world with a press of his finger, it was difficult for him to completely calm down no matter what. However, this didn't affect anything. He raised his finger and pressed the button. But the moment his finger touched the button, there were suddenly a few exclamations in the field. His finger had already landed on the button, and the indicator light representing the transfer of mana had already lit up. He looked up in surprise and saw a figure suddenly rushing into the transport array from the outer circle. Then, the transport array shone with blue light and the space in front of him distorted. The figure and the two elves who had already entered the transport array disappeared together. Chapter 1260. The light faded, and everyone looked at each other in blank dismay. There was a strange silence around the transport array. Sue looked around with knit brows before giving the order. "Immediately check who's missing." Elder Lysania on the other side also gave the order. The New Flyer and the Azhara tribes elves checked at the same time and quickly reported the results. The Azhara tribes elves didn't miss anyone, but the New Flyer was missing someone. It was Lucian, who had come with Sue from a Signs planet. "What is this brat doing?" Akali angrily roared out. "Does he not want his life?" The surrounding Frestec Chamber of Commerce researchers had worked with Lucian for several years. Because Lucian's personality was very good and he was very generous, most of them had a good relationship with him. Now that they saw him suddenly charge into the transport array, they couldn't help feeling a bit surprised. This brat normally didn't seem like an impulsive person. Why did he dare do such a bold thing this time? All right, there's no meaning in complaining. Sue waved his hand and stopped the New Flyer people from discussing. "Akali, go and find a book." "What are you looking for a book for?" Akali was surprised. "Write something and send it through the transport array." Sue said. "As for whether they can send a message back or not, we can't care about that right now." Akali understood. This was the communication method she had discussed with Sue E before, but now that Lucian had messed it up, she had forgotten about it. But when Akali was prepared to have her subordinates bring over the prepared notebooks and pens, one of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's researchers suddenly called out in surprise. There's a communication signal coming. Communication signal? Everyone turned to look at him. That researcher looked at the transport array in front of him in surprise before looking down at the magic communication device he was responsible for. He pointed at the transport array in a daze and said, It's a communication signal coming from there. Sue E and Akali looked at each other before shouting, Immediately connect. Everyone stared at the researcher as he pressed the button to connect the communication. Lucian's excited voice immediately sounded. Sir Chairman, Manager Akali, I did it. Akali knit her brows and shouted, What did you do? Lucian, do you know that what you did is very dangerous? Not only is it dangerous for you, it might cause the experiment to fail and put your 2 elven companions in danger. Perhaps he was scared by the tone in Akali's eyes, but after a bit of silence, Lucian replied in a low voice, I just wanted to give it a try. Sir Manager and Sir Chairman didn't agree, so I charged him myself. Akali's eyes narrowed, and she wanted to reprimand him, but Sue E raised his hand to stop her. He asked, Lucian, tell me, what is the situation over there? Lucian, I'm fine now, and so are my 2 elven friends. Come, you guys should say hello too. A moment later, the 2 elves' slightly hesitant voices sounded from the magic communication device. Elder Lysania replied a few words before turning to Sue E and saying, Chairman Sue, it turns out that this teleportation array is safe. I'm going over now, don't stop me. Sue E waved his hand and said, You can't say that yet. At the very least, they don't seem to be able to come back. Elder Lysania stared blankly for a moment before asking Lucian and the 2 elves a few more questions. She confirmed that although they had found a teleportation array over there and had a teleportation base similar to the one on Alice's side, they couldn't activate it to come back. Sui glanced at Elder Lysania. He knew that the 2 elves sent by Elder Lysania were elites of the Azhara tribe. They had decent magic power, but they were only decent. They had not reached the level of a great mage, so naturally, they were not familiar with teleportation magic. It was clearly impossible to rely on them and Lucian, who could be considered weak in magic power, to activate the teleportation array by themselves. Akali, activate the teleportation array again and send them a batch of supplies, including food, water, and all kinds of instruments. He said, Since they've gone over, then let's build a small research base over there. If we can copy this one, then we might be able to activate the teleportation array over there and see if we can come back. Akelin pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement with Su Yi's suggestion. Chairman Su, just the 3 of them might not be enough. Should we send more people over? Elder Lysania asked. Su Yi shook his head and said, It's just a preliminary data analysis, so we don't need too many people. Well, we need more instruments and time. We just need to ensure their supplies and keep in touch. Sooner or later, we'll be able to research this magic array. Akali said with a smile, Don't worry. Since that kid Lucian can send sound magic signals back through the teleportation array, it proves that the teleportation array is 2-way. It's just that Lucian and the others haven't found a way to come back yet. After saying this, Akali turned to Su Yi and said, Lucian could be considered the one with the deepest understanding of magic communication networks among them. He often comes up with some strange ideas that have inspired me many times. This time, he ran over by himself and sent a magic communication signal so quickly. It seems like this was premeditated long ago. I commend his courage, but I can't agree with his methods. Check and see if this kid ran into something that made him take such a risk. Akali gave a shrug and casually replied, not caring that much. Although Lucian was one of her more capable research assistants, she didn't interfere in his personal life and didn't think that this was a big deal. Now that Lucian made such a risky move, perhaps it was because something happened, but the result was good. After chatting with Lucian through the teleportation array for a while, they basically determined the situation on the other side. After a discussion, Su Yi, Akali, and Elder Lysania decided to follow Su Yi's previous strategy for the time being. However, this way, the situation here could only be described in one word: wait. The research on the teleportation array took time. There was no better way than waiting. Don't worry, President. Judging from the situation we have now, I estimate that we will be able to make a breakthrough in a few years at most. At that time, as long as Lucian and the others can come back from the other side, I won't stop you if you want to go. He could only smile bitterly. I hope so. Hashtag the armies of the Malar Empire and the Lampari Kingdom were still in a stalemate at the northern part of the former Kanla Empire. However, in the southern part of the line of confrontation, the territory of the former Kanla Empire had undergone a shocking change. After the fall of Wimbledon City, the various provinces of the former Kanla Empire either broke away from control or declared their independence. However, with the establishment of autonomous governments in the Lamask, Merinda, and Kamal provinces, the other provinces followed suit. After the fall of Wimbledon City, of the 37 provinces of the former Kanla Empire, apart from 4 that were still under the control of the Malar Empire and 3 that were being fought over by the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire, 24 of the remaining 30 provinces had their governments reorganized and became autonomous regions. Coupled with the Toral Autonomous Region, which had left the Kanla Empire due to pressure from the New Flyer, the former Kanla Empire that was located in the central and southern parts of the Signs had been replaced by various autonomous regions of various sizes. While they were all called autonomous regions, they were fundamentally different. Most of them were led by the previous provincial governor Fu or the nobles with the most influence in the province. Although their names had changed, they weren't that different from the original provinces of the Kandra Empire. Secondly, there were those that had fallen into unrest due to the workers' unrest, which almost completely broke the old order of the nobles. In the end, they had no choice but to appoint a new council to govern them. There were also some that were controlled by the merchant guilds and relied on their guards to maintain order. And even though there were all sorts of strange names, the so-called autonomous regions all used the same name. It was as if they had come to an agreement beforehand. The other 6 provinces that didn't do so quickly settled down after the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Lampari Kingdom, and the New Flyer mobilized their troops in the name of maintaining order on the continent. What was even more shocking was yet to come. A year after Wimbledon City fell, the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Lampari Kingdom entered Wimbledon City together and took Wimbledon City back from the Malar Empire. 2 years after Wimbledon City fell, the leaders of the Kanla Empire's provinces, now known as autonomous regions, gathered in Wimbledon City to participate in the Kandra Federal Parliament. After a month and a half of discussion, a total of 27 provinces came to an agreement and announced the establishment of the Kandra Federal United States. In name, all the provinces of the Kanla Empire, now known as autonomous regions, belonged to the Kandra Federal United States. The autonomous regions were renamed the Kandra Federal United States, and the states under them belonged to the Kandra Federal United States in name, accepting the management of the Kandra Federal United States. But in reality, each territory and each state had their own autonomy. The so-called Kandra Federal United States was just an alliance of territories and states. After serious discussion, the first leader of the Kandra Federal United States, the Kandra President, was decided. It was the Kandra Emperor's 3rd son, the Kanla Empire's 3rd Prince Frank Kandra. So the Kanla Empire had fallen, been destroyed, fell into chaos, and turned into the Kandra Federal United States in the end. The leader was actually a direct descendant of the Kandra royal family. This made people sigh. The world was unpredictable and unpredictable. Chapter 1261. With the establishment of the Kandra Federation, the Kanla Empire's territory finally regained its peace and stability. But for the entire Signs, there was still a long way to go before peace and stability was restored. In the east of the continent, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom used their advantage in developing the long-range magic missile technology to heavily injure the Eastern countries' Alliance Army, further expanding their advantage. However, the Alliance Army was made up of the Eastern countries and had the support of several Eastern countries behind them. Even if they couldn't resist on the battlefield, with the support of the Eastern countries, they could still barely hold on. They were still in a fierce battle with the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom. Of course, if one really wanted to compare, what really affected the situation of Signs was the battle between the Lampari Kingdom and the Marlodi Empire. Although the Kandra Federation had been established and gathered the Kamla Empire's provinces together, it was impossible for them to be like the Kamla Empire from before, gathering together to become a large country. Therefore, in the current Signs, the only large countries that were left were the Malar Empire and the Lampari Kingdom. The Malar Empire had a deep background, and there was no need to mention their strength. In the past few decades, the Lampuri Kingdom had first taken over a large part of the Frankish Kingdom. Then they had taken over the Sac Kingdom, and then they had swallowed the Antilla Kingdom. Just in terms of land area, they could compare to the Marlo Empire. Adding in the fact that the Lampari Kingdom's magic machine industry was strong and they had the support of the New Flyer, they were ahead of all the other countries in Signs when it came to military magic machine technology. Therefore, their military strength wasn't weaker than the Malar Empires at all. In these 2 years, the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire had fought many times. Although there were many victories, the Lampari Kingdom had won most of the time, forcing the Malar Empire out of the Kamla Empire. However, as time passed, the situation gradually changed. Although the Lampari Kingdom had swallowed several countries and greatly expanded their territory, it would take a long time for them to completely absorb these countries. So in terms of background, the Lampari Kingdom couldn't compare to the Malar Empire that had existed for close to 1,000 years. Just take the long-range magic missile. The Malar Empire had developed the same technology 2 months after the Lampari Kingdom took it out, allowing them to compete with the Lampari Kingdom. As time passed, the deep background of the Malar Empire became even more apparent. As the war between the two countries intensified, the empire was completely opened and the empire was Sign's military magic machine industry. All kinds of military magic machines were being made. During the years of fighting with the Kamla Empire, the Malar Empire's military magic machines had always been at the same level as the Kamla Empire. Now that they felt the powerful pressure from the Lampari Kingdom, the Malar Empire's national machine was operating at full power, immediately releasing a shocking amount of power. In just a single year, the number of magic tanks in the Marlo Empire army had increased from 4,000 to 15,000. The number of magic airships had also increased from 300 to 2,100. As for the magic cannons, magic guns, and other things, there were countless of them. On the other hand, the Lampari Kingdom had only swallowed the Antilla Kingdom a few years ago, so they couldn't use the resources of the Antilla Kingdom at all. They even had to use a part of their energy and soldiers to suppress the Antilla Kingdom. As for the Sac Kingdom, they had been in turmoil for many years, which also took away a part of the Lampari Kingdom's energy. So in comparison, the resources that the Lampari Kingdom could use were limited to the Lampari Kingdom's territory and most of the Frankish Kingdom's territory. Before they started the war, these resources were enough for the Lampari Kingdom's 130,000 army. But when the Malar Empire gathered the power of the entire country and started a war with the Lampari Kingdom, these resources were a bit lacking. If it wasn't for the fact that the Lampari Kingdom had a complete magic machine industry, surpassing the Malar Empire in terms of technology, especially military magic machines, they wouldn't have been able to resist the counterattack of the Malar Empire. The Malar Empire could equip their army with military magic machines in just a single year, but the Lampari Kingdom didn't even need to try. They knew that they couldn't support this consumption. So as the war between the two countries deepened, the absolute suppression of the Malar Empire that the Lampari Kingdom had on the Malar Empire disappeared bit by bit. Rather, they were slowly pushed back by the Malar Empire. When the Lampari Kingdom was at its peak, they had almost driven the Malar Empire's army out of the Kamla Empire's territory, even having 1 foot in the Malar Empire's territory. But after the Malar Empire mobilized the power of the entire country, the Lampari Kingdom's army couldn't take another step forward. After this, the Lampari Kingdom's front line was stretched out. They didn't have enough soldiers, and they had a long supply line, so they began to retreat. After 2 years of war between the two countries, the Lampari Kingdom's front line began to retreat for the first time. And with this retreat, it was like a dam collapsing. They couldn't hold on any longer. The Lampari Kingdom's army was defeated again and again, retreating again and again. In just 3 months, they had given up the 2 northern provinces of the Kamla Empire. The Malar Empire's momentum became stronger and stronger, relying on the large amounts of military magic machines and supplies from the Malar Empire's rear. They kept advancing. If this continued, the Malar Empire would be able to take over the Kamla Empire like they did a few years ago. They might even attack the Lampari Kingdom and take over the Lampari Kingdom. Of course, this was based on the premise that no accidents occurred, and war was filled with accidents. Continent calendar year 3833 July 6th, a very normal day. However, an unexpected incident happened, and this day became unusual from then on. At noon on July 6th, the Malar Empire and the Lampari Kingdom's armies began a fierce battle in the north of the Kamla Empire. This was a normal battle that had occurred in the past few years, but because of a mistake made by the Malar Empire's magic airship squadron, this battle was recorded in the history of signs. The Malar Empire's 3rd Magic Airship Squadron was bombing the Lampari Kingdom's logistics base, but because they weren't familiar with the terrain, they had miscalculated the location. Because they had met the Lampari Kingdom's Magic Airship Squadron, they had hurriedly thrown down the magic bombs that they had prepared. However, they didn't hit the Lampari Kingdom's logistics base as expected. Rather, they hit a refugee camp that was some distance away from the battlefield. It was fine if this was a normal refugee camp. The Malar Empire would at most receive strong condemnation and protests from the various countries of signs. But this refugee camp had been set up by the New Flyer. Moreover, in this refugee camp, there had been a group of 300 New Flyer guards stationed there. In the bombing, not only had most of the 5,000 refugees died, many of the workers that the New Flyer and the other companies had sent to manage the daily lives of the refugees had also died. Even the New Flyer guards had lost over 100 people because of this. After this matter broke out, everyone in Signs was in an uproar. Bombing a refugee camp was something that everyone despised and condemned, but not only had the Malar Empire bombed a refugee camp, they had also killed over 100 New Flyer guards. This was simply a naked provocation to the New Flyer, and it could even be called a declaration of war. In the past 20 years, although the Signs had been in various wars and was not peaceful, no matter which country it was, they would tacitly agree on one principle, and that was to not provoke the New Flyer as much as possible. The former president of the New Flyer, Su Yi, had already clearly expressed his wishes, and that was to no longer pay attention to anything related to the New Flyer. At the same time, he had also expressed the attitude of the New Flyer, which was to not participate in the internal affairs of any country or any war between two countries. In the past 20 years, Su Yi had almost always stayed in the Demon Cloud continent, and indeed did not intervene in the affairs of the Signs. As for the New Flyer, although the point of not intervening in the internal affairs of other countries was debatable, the point of not participating in any war between two countries had always been strictly adhered to. Although many people suspected that the New Flyer would secretly support the Lampari Kingdom, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, the Kingdom of Ruhr, and the Drake Duchy, these countries that had good relations with them, the New Flyer had indeed not directly supported these countries in these years, and it did not form an alliance with the Kingdom of Ruhr to invade the Kamla Empire like nearly 30 years ago. Therefore, regardless of whether they believed it or not, no country would want to provoke the New Flyer. No country would be so stupid as to provoke such a powerful enemy for no reason. However, now that such an incident had occurred, would the New Flyers still adhere to the previous principle of not intervening in the war between the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire? Chapter 1262. Duke Yodel, Duke Masalan. I represent the new flyer to formally propose to the two countries to stop this war and sign an armistice agreement. The new flyer's foreign relations minister Fema pushed up the glasses on her nose and looked at the two people sitting at the table with a serious expression, as she spoke of her intentions with a serious expression. To be able to invite these two dukes who were in charge of the front lines of the Lampari Kingdom and the Malar Empire to sit down and talk to them. Even if it was the new flyer, it still took a lot of effort. The Lampari Kingdom side was easy, but Chairman Freya would agree if she mentioned it to King Raymond. But the Malar Empire's side didn't immediately agree to the new flyer's request. Rather, after the new flyer contacted them and finally contacted Duke Southgate, who was the finance minister of the Malar Empire, the Malar Empire finally agreed. This meeting could be considered the first meeting between the front-line commanders of both sides. It had a special meaning, but the atmosphere wasn't harmonious. Hearing Fema's words, the Malar Empire's front-line commander Duke Masalan gave a cold snort. "Your new flyer wants us to stop fighting? What a joke. Why should we listen to you?" Fema looked at him, not being surprised by his reaction. According to the reports, Duke Masalan was one of the representatives of the Malar Empire's military, being the one who advocated war the most. To have him agree to a ceasefire, it was harder than ascending to the heavens. Your new flyer isn't embarrassed to say that you won't interfere in the war between the other two countries? When our Malar Empire was at a disadvantage, why didn't you jump out? Now that we've turned the situation around, once you see that the Lampari Kingdom is at a disadvantage, you quickly jump out to stop fighting? Hey! Duke Masalan's face was filled with disdain, as his eyes looking at Fema were filled with open aggression, not hiding it at all. The Lampari Kingdom is at a disadvantage. Hearing his words, Duke Yodel, the frontline commander of the Lampari Kingdom, laughed coldly. "Don't think that you have the right to be arrogant in front of me just because you won a few meaningless battles. Do you really think we can't beat you? Is it not?" Duke Masalan glared back. "If you're not convinced, let's go back now. Do you believe that I'll immediately beat the crap out of you?" Then he glanced at Favin and sneered. "Don't think that you can be arrogant just because New Flyer wants to help you. Let me tell you, those rookies in the New Flyer Guard have never seen blood in so many years. So what if they join the battle? The way I see it, the people outside are just scaring themselves by making the New Flyer sound so scary. Actually, the New Flyer is already on its last legs, right? Otherwise, he would have led his troops directly to our empire like Chairman Su did in the past. Why would he need to waste his breath here? Duke Masalan, please pay attention to your words. Our new flyer has always adhered to the principle of peaceful coexistence and common development. Unless it's necessary, we won't use force easily. When it's necessary, Duke Masalan let out an ear-piercing sneer again. Previously, those guys from the Lampari Kingdom were about to reach our Malar Empire. Why didn't New Flyer jump out and say that? Now that we're about to reach the Lampari Kingdom, you think it's necessary? Heh, it's different to have a son as the king. Hearing the last sentence, Favin's expression changed. Duke Yodel was furious. He stood up and slammed the table. He pointed at Duke Masalan and shouted, "Shut up! No matter what, you're still a duke. Don't you feel ashamed for saying such things?" Duke Masalan looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. "What? Are you feeling guilty because I'm right?" Duke Yodel angrily reached into his pocket and took out a magic pistol. He pointed the muzzle at Duke Masalan. "Take back your words immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Duke Masalan was not afraid. He even shrugged with a smile. "Shoot. See if I'll blink." At this time, the personal guard behind the two also took out their guns and aimed at each other. The atmosphere instantly became extremely tense. "Please stop." Favin's voice sounded. In this tense atmosphere, her voice became extremely calm, instantly easing some of the tension. "Gentlemen, I invited the two of you here to discuss a truce, not to start a war." Ferwin turned around and stared at Duke Masalan. "Duke Masalan, the reason why our Frestek Chamber of Commerce chose to stop fighting at this time is because I think you should understand. If it wasn't for your Malar Empire's excessive behavior, New Flyer would never interfere in the dispute between your two countries. Duke Massillon's expression froze. Of course he understood. New Flyer jumping out at this time was, of course, because of the refugee camp incident. Whether the Marlowe Empire's magic airship fleet made a mistake or not, the fact was that the Frestac Chamber of Commerce had lost over 100 guards and staff, as well as losing a large refugee camp. The Frestac Chamber of Commerce had lost the halo that could protect the refugees, which was equal to a heavy slap to the Frestac Chamber of Commerce's face. If New Flyer didn't react to this, that would be strange. What the Maller Empire was most worried about was that New Flyer would use this matter as an excuse to participate in the war. They would form an alliance with the Lampari Kingdom to declare war on the Maller Empire. If New Flyer made this choice, the Maller Empire would be under a large amount of pressure. Although the Maller Empire had developed for many years and their magic machine industry had already formed a complete system, they could even break away from the influence of New Flyer. It wasn't like 20 years ago when the two empires couldn't stop New Flyer, even if they worked together. However, New Flyer's strength was terrifying, so it was best if they didn't make a move. Our company is worried that if this war continues with the scale of the war between your two countries, this kind of thing will become more and more frequent. Not only will it affect the peace of the continent, it will also seriously damage the benefits of our company. So, we seriously request a truce from both sides. Duke Marceran gave a laugh. He thought that the Frestac Chamber of Commerce was quite straightforward, directly saying that this would seriously damage their benefits. So they asked for a ceasefire. However, New Flyer's benefits were not the same as the Maller Empire's benefits. Duke Massillon stood up. Manager Favin. The Maller Empire will never agree to a truce. If New Flyer wants to join forces with the Lampari Kingdom, please do so. Help me pass a message to President Freya. She is not her father, Chairman Su E. New Flyer is no longer the New Flyer that the two empires couldn't deal with 20 years ago. Tell her to have some self-awareness and take care of herself. After saying this, Duke Massillon left. Duke Yodel stared blankly at the direction Duke Massillon left, then turned back to look at Favin. Minister Favin, he never thought that the Maller Empire's attitude would be so tough. Did they really think that New Flyer was nothing to worry about? However, after thinking about it, perhaps Duke Massillon's words made sense. After all, it was different from 20 years ago. The magic industry of the various countries on the continent was developing extremely rapidly. The gap between the magic industry and New Flyer was very small. In terms of military magic machines, the major countries were investing in the development of magic machines. The gap between them and New Flyer was even smaller. There might even be no gap at all. Otherwise, why didn't New Flyer really make a move for so many years? Even if there was any military action, it was only to bully the primitive natives on the Demon Cloud continent, who had not experienced the baptism of the magic industry civilization. According to the intelligence, their combat power was very ordinary. If this was really the case, then New Flyer's combat power was far less powerful than before. For the Marlowe Empire to have this kind of attitude, it was understandable. Favin saw the changing expression on Duke Yodel's face. How could she not guess Duke Yodel's thoughts? However, she didn't want to explain anything. She just nodded at Duke Yodel and said, "Don't worry, our Chamber of Commerce will not give up on the truce. Duke Yodel, I hope the Lampari Kingdom will cooperate more." Duke Yodel smiled bitterly. Cooperate? How could they cooperate? Negotiations between countries could only be built on the basis of strength. If New Flyer and the Lampari Kingdom couldn't suppress the Maller Empire, then no matter how they negotiated, it would be a waste of effort. However, New Flyer's current strength was still a mystery. Not only did Duke Massillon have doubts, but even Duke Yodel had doubts in his heart. If the combat power of New Flyer's guards was actually very weak, then how could the Lampari Kingdom rely on their strength? What made Duke Yodel even more suspicious was New Flyer's choice this time. If it was the previous New Flyer, and more than 100 of its guards were killed, perhaps Chairman Su would have directly declared war on the Maller Empire without saying anything. He wouldn't have sent someone out and tried his best to propose a truce. In the eyes of others, it was simply a sign of weakness. Thinking of this, Duke Yodel strongly missed the previous new flyer, Sue E. If Chairman Sue was still here, no matter how bold Duke Moss Allen was, he definitely wouldn't dare act this arrogant, right? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.